And so I'm going to do at the end of the class, you'll have a recording of the entire class, at least from this point forward. My apologies there. I forgot this initial setup, but there's uh, what we've just gone through, even if it's foreign to you now, it will very quickly just become second nature and it won't be anything that you're going to miss out on by not having. So, but my apologies there. I just forgot to turn it on. So we're now recording. And to keep in terms of legalities, I'm to let everyone know you're being recorded. So uh, don't say anything you don't want to have recorded for posterity. I promise, though, no social media. Other than these recordings are going to go up on my web or on my YouTube Carlson channel, but they're only going to be available to the members of this class. Um, so you'll have those to be able to refer to later. All right. So now let's talk about the settings. And also let me talk about the fact we're actually running a little bit past our nominal lunch break time. But what I'd like to do, if it's okay with all of you, is let's hold off lunch until 12:30. And that way, poor Fran won't have to eat lunch at 11 o'clock. She can at least wait till 11:30. And then we'll come back. And plus, I want to get through these settings real quickly so we can start moving ahead into what we need to start learning. So, settings being something we typically set and then forget about, but here's where they're going to be. And there's a number of things on our settings menu, but the big granddaddy of all of it is going to be this Carlson configure. Now, you're going to see a command right above it called set your project and data folders. That's also available from this Carlson configure. The same thing, there's our settings explorer, which gave us that the spreadsheet interface that you saw in in the previous or in the textbook. So if I did a 2D to 3D by um, screen entities, or let's say by surface model, so you can see I've got a vertical offset. Right now it's set to -4 because the last time I ran the command, I turned a 2D polyline into a 3D polyline, draped it on the surface, and dropped it 4 feet. We were putting a water line in. So that's what is currently set. And there's the layer it went to. There's the defaults. If I wanted to change these back, I could do that. All right. So again, I'm not going to, uh, go through the minutia of all that because those are all set in those individual command dialog boxes. So let's go to settings menu and choose Carlson configure. And we've got a number of different things that we can set down here, things that we would not necessarily work on. Jack, for yours, since you had the construction module, let's start with that. I'm going to go all the way to the bottom and I'm going to choose this takeoff slash sitenet settings. And when I do that, these are some of the settings that I would use if I'm using that module. Nothing that you need to really worry about here, except over here on the right is where you may see your colors of things change. If you're building surfaces like existing in design, you have to tell it, what layers make existing, what layers make design. If you have these color things checked, it's going to change the colors of all those things to be whatever these colors are set. So I would recommend that you uncheck those unless you are using those as you're building your surfaces and you want to see those different elements in those different colors. Okay, so it's nothing for our class that you need to worry about. Now, the localization settings, that's not the same localization as if any of you surveyors are used to localizing based on your coordinate values. Or if I said localization, in this case, it's talking about switching to different locales around the world. We could switch to a different language. We can switch to, yeah, okay, fine. We could switch categories. These are my annotate defaults. I've got Kogo design, all these different, here's some general things. And I've got a settings. I've got these, the angle reporting mode, the offset distance, station name, give it some default. considerations. So this is just a way to localize your installation of your software, something that most of us will never need to see. Your mine note, mining settings, section profile, and hydrology settings, nothing you need to really worry about there. But for instance, your hydrology settings control things like pipe distances, whether you're using slope or horizontal, center manhole to center manhole, or edge of manhole to edge of manhole, which is your actual pipe length, for instance, and different ways that you prompt there. So again, those are very specific to those modules. Now, the first one that we might want to take a look at is this survey settings. And this would apply mostly if you do use the survey module. And if you do use that survey module, now I don't know what this value is set to by default. It used to be set to compact. And what that does is it puts another little menu in the survey module called CG Survey, and it's an entire subsystem called the Cowherd and Goodman Survey Program in a separate menu. And if it's compact, you pull down that one menu and get to everything else with side menus. If you say expanded, it puts all the menus across in addition to your Carlson menus. That's done because a lot of surveyors use that CNG survey software for a lot of years. And Carlson actually bought the the Cowherd and Goodman company, and basically just to get access to their network least squares adjustment routines. And because of all those surveyors that once C&G became Carlson, they might not want to switch their software because they've got a lot of time invested in learning that software. So this is Carlson's way of giving them access to that entire system. So it will actually run inside of Carlson, which is running inside of IntelliCAD. Um, so if you don't have it and don't need it, if you don't need to have access to the Cowherd and Goodman setups, set that to none in case it is set to compact, and then it'll take that menu out of your way and you won't have to worry about it. Okay. Then when I'm doing my initial traversing or side shot angle mode, I would, you can either prompt for which mode to use, or you can say by default, I want to use an angle right or azimuth. And then a couple of different things that control when we're doing COGO calculations, whether we automatically record that in a raw file, automatically draw lines between traversing stations. And then so there's only um, one here that's really helpful, and that's this automatic point object snap on. If I turn that on here, it's automatically going to set it. And you'll see how that applies later. Again, it's something you can turn on and off from the settings menu. But again, that's one that you might want to just have on by default, and I'll show you how that works and how it can be helpful. These others are not really all that necessary. This land desktop fieldbook codes, it lets you predefine a set of raw descriptions and compare them to fieldbook codes. We're not going to be using any of that stuff from that system, so we'll leave that unset and then we'll say okay. So again, under survey settings, really the one to do is that set the CG survey menu to none, and you might want to turn on this automatic point snapping. Doesn't matter if you don't, though you can set that later. Now, we've got the remaining buttons, and the one we're going to spend the most time on, and probably have to get into some of the examples of it after lunch, but it's under this general settings, and there's all of these here. I'm going to cancel that. I just want to show you there's a lot of stuff there. So I'm going to start these other little ones first, and then we'll take a look at those after lunch. So if we look at our surface settings, and these are going to be some default behavior that we set up for surfaces. In the upper part of this dialog, there's a little, you can see that little faint rectangle that's drawn around those fields. And it says inverse distance / least squares modeling parameters. we give it a search radius, the maximum number of samples, maximum number of quadrants to search, and the minimum number of quadrants to search. And this is if you are building your surfaces using gridding. And we're not going to be using gridding, we're going to be using triangulation. But this would be when you're sitting on a point, you're going to look around for other points with elevation information. You're going to tell it to look, to limit your searching to that radius. So it would be to the nearest 10,000 feet, and look around yourself in a 360-degree circle. And those are our quadrants. So I'm going to say at a minimum, I'm going to say you can look and maybe not find any. So I'll leave it at 0. And then the maximum number of samples, let's say I find 20 nearby points, and that I'm going to consider that enough. Or if you say I want 100 points, or I want 5 at most, whatever, you can control that. And you can also say, well, I want to, let's say out of my 20, I want to make sure I've got at least, um, I've got at least some in some of the other quadrants. So I may limit my maximum per quadrant to say 5. So as I look around myself in a circle, I want to find at most 5 points in each of those quadrants, okay, as a maximum, up to 20. So I could have 4 quadrants, do 5, and it doesn't have to multiply out like that. You can say the max you want to find in any given one quadrant would be whatever this number is. And you could, control that sampling. We're not going to be doing that stuff. That's more for the mining software where we're using gridding. And again, the next one is this grid resolution bit where we set either the number of cells, grid cells in the X and Y direction, or the dimensions of a cell. So I'm going to say every 50 feet, and then the precision, again, it's number of decimal places that you want to use. So that would be as it finds information, it builds this grid of elevations, but it skips stuff. If I use this dimensions of a cell every 50 feet, it computes the elevations at those 50-foot intervals, and it doesn't ignore the information between it, but it assumes it changes straight line from one 50-foot location to the next 50-foot location. And it assumes it is all being linear. Okay, so that helps us speed up that modeling process using gridding. We're not going to do any of those, so it doesn't matter at all what you set up here. What we're going to be concerned with is down below here. And we're going to tell it when you're drawing the contours, how many times do you want to check it for crossing contours? You can set that to any number out of this list. Looks like it goes down to 30. 10's a good number of times to check, and it's only checking that to see if it misinterprets the contours as they cross the triangles of our surfaces, how many times to go back and recheck to see if it's crossing. So it checks it once, finds a couple of places, fixes those, and then goes back and checks it again to see if the fix might have caused any other crossing problems. So we're going to leave that set to 10. We have another checkbox. The rest of these are just in general, so you can save grids. Again, we're not using griddings, but save the grids using a binary format. That's typically more efficient. You can simplify differences 10 to reduce their size if you want to. There's no real need to do that anymore because the computers have plenty of memory and storage. That just basically, thins out your differences 10, which are the volume comparisons. But we don't need to do that. Now, here's the 3 that we do want to turn on. We want to track our 10 history, include our detailed source, and track surface data changes. This will allow you to, if you edit those 10s, those resulting surfaces, by doing the direct 10 file edits, like switching the direction of a triangle, or removing a triangle, removing a point, or adding in additional break lines directly into the 10, then you want those things on so you can keep track of them and reapply them as you make any further edits. Now, hopefully, your work practice might mirror mine. Is if I find a problem in my 10, I don't generally go into the 10 and make specific edits directly onto that 10. And when you hear me say the word 10, that's that TIN. I'm talking about a triangulated irregular network. That's a series of triangles that form the surface. So I don't generally do that. When I find a problem in that 10, I usually go back out into the drawing and I fix whatever it is that caused that 10 to compute incorrectly, and I recreate the 10 from scratch. That's my preferred approach, because that way I don't have to remember those edits. I don't have to rely on this to remember those edits from my history. And I know that my data is now correct that built the 10 in the first place. So if I ever had to go back and rebuild it, I've got the correct data. So, but I do want you to turn those three check boxes on and this one as well, but we're not going to be doing any grids, so that won't apply. And then say OK. So that was our surface settings. We looked at survey, we looked at surface. Now we've got, I'm going to stay on this right-hand side. I'm going to look first at my startup settings and my drawing setup. Startup settings, I'm going to go ahead and click that, are a set of settings that are going to be in place as my defaults when I first start the system. And there's my template name. And you see, and I can hit the browse button and I could point it to a different template. And notice it's in this location that is governed by the configuration of your CAD software. So this is going to go under users, Crawford, app data, roaming, Autodesk, AutoCAD 2024, R24.3 ENU template. So that's going to be that location that it's going to look at, which really is not the one I should be using. I should be under Carlson 2025. Let's see if I can find it. I think it's under support. Yeah, those are some of the templates that I might want to set that to. So say Carlson National CAD Standards Civil or Survey, for instance. You could point that to a different location. There's Carlson 21, Carlson 24. So you could point that to a particular template location. It will be copied to app data roaming Carlson. It's a user Crawford app data roaming Carlson software Carlson. iCAD 12. Oh, okay, so okay, no. So if I browse that and I looked in that location, instead of there, I look in here. Okay, so that's where it's pointing me to. So now I've got these as a different set of locations. Maybe I'll use that one there. I'll set it to Carlson. Okay, that's fine. And so all this is allowing you to find a particular template file. Now, that's not anything to really worry about. But if you're trying to, establish some company standards or whatever, you might have your CAD manager has set that up and put it in a particular place that you can reach on the network. Then you would point this there as a default template to suggest that you use as you're getting things started up. Okay. And again, you can feel free to leave that sitting like whatever it sets to by default. The next one is, where is my project folder going to go by default? By default, it's going to start at that Carlson Projects folder. And that means if I save a drawing if I create a drawing and I say, go make this drawing, I can set it to a folder within this folder or just use that folder. Or if I create a project, if I'm using that as my organization standard, I'm using the project folder method, then it would create that project folder as a subfolder to this location. So again, you might have it pointed to a network location that the company uses on a network, or you could just leave it sitting here, and that's where they're going to start going by default. Again, you can browse away from them in any of those dialogues if you want. The next is which profile name to use, and that's a named profile that's part of your CAD installation. I would suggest just leaving that like it is. The IntelliCAD command switches means when it starts this up, it's not going to splash the IntelliCAD logo up as it loads. And you can put it there or not. That's its default. And there's a checkbox that says you want to skip the splash screen. That was that Carlson little colorful splash screen you saw when it started up. You could turn that off if you don't want to see it either. All right, so that's basically it on the startup. Now, the next one above that is our drawing setup, and that you've seen before. Remember, we've seen this English units using US survey feet, 20 scale, and this would be, now it's reading what I've set at this point, but you could, preset this to be the one that it's going to always use. Okay, so I'm doing a bunch of defaults here. Again, it doesn't really matter because you set that as you enter the drawing anyway. So I would use a typical, if I'm doing vertical angle calculations, right now I'm not going to apply any. Over here on the right-hand side controls my points for promptings and labels. And I've got these different attribute layouts where I could switch this particular a little preview of what they look like. There's one where the elevation is up at an angle, point number above, description below. I like that as a default. It's point number, elevation, description, all lined up, matching on the left edges, and the points off here to the left of the elevation label. Tell it whether or not I want to use descriptions, elevations, and whether or not I want to plot the point on its proper elevation. You can uncheck that and all your points stay down at 0, but it does read their elevations. But I like to have my points actually sitting vertically where they go, so I leave that on. I'm not going to prompt for rod heights and symbol names as a default. I can again turn that on as I need. I'm setting my angle format to bearings, and I'm choosing to use point numbers and to automatic point numbering, meaning as I create points, it goes to my next available point number to assign the point number to it. Okay. Again, no vertical angle. And then my drawing setup, when I start, I want to use a drawing template, or you could use configuration, which would use this configuration, or you can point it to a template. Okay. I'm going to check or uncheck actually this display non-Carlson drawing units upon opening. And that's sort of a little kind of an afterthought. If you open up a file that has not been declared to use particular units, it will give you that little message and allow you to run drawing setup. But since you're running drawing setup anyway, it doesn't really there. And I'm just going to suppress the warning. And then on our coordinate system, by default, I'm going to use a grid system, use my predefined. I've already defined and selected my NAD 83, 1986 adjustment, Pennsylvania. It just says Pennsylvania. It would normally be Pennsylvania South, which I would simply set from here, and I would have picked it like I did the first time out. So it does say South. They just don't give you enough room to see it. So that's my drawing setup. And again, this is something that's just typically done and forgotten about because all of these things are also controlled by those individual dialogues as we start things up. Okay, so now the last little thing to take a look at is this, before we hit our general settings, is this project data folders. If I choose that, this is like what you saw back here in our book, right? right here, where we chose a project folder structure. By default, we're using the drawing folder. So what this is asking us for, there's that dialog box, there's my default, use the drawing folder, meaning everything's going to go where my drawing folder has been stored by default. I've got my startup where I want that to start looking. There's that Carlson projects. Again, you could point it to a network location if you wish, or a different, you might have a folder called drive D, and you've got, you know, um, survey projects. You might have just something declared, and that's where you want it to start instead of at Carlson projects. So you could choose that. Um, and then if you use the drawing folder, again, there's not anything here that you need to worry about setting, but if you switch to the project folder and then that project subfolders, you would see whatever list of subfolders you've created. I've got one called data, and I've got one called drawing folders, and one called other, and one called program settings. Now within data, I have alignments and profiles, deed information, mining stuff. You don't have to do any of those. Under other, I've got like contract information, deliverables, and PDFs. And deliverables is also divided into point clouds as a subfolder. So all of these different things are just preset folders that it would build and create. So the next thing you would do is go to your data type subfolders, and you would take this list of data types. And again, I'm looking at all categories. Here's my civil, here's civil survey, here's general, GIS, hydro, different settings that apply for different data types. And I would assign information to that. So here, for instance, I've got this CDT file, which is a mining custom data table, and I'm going to put that in this folder called whatever the project is, data, and then mining stuff, okay, which was, if you looked at this list of folders, there's that data mining stuff. Some of these I haven't assigned. Some of them are assigned to settings, which is my draw leader with text. So all these different things. Now, the reason I wanted to show you this is for this reason only. We're going to typically use our drawing folder. If you do, none of that you have to remember. But here's what you can do. Even if you're using that method of drawing folder, let's say you run into a file that has an extension of it called, let's say you see an extension that says dot PRO, and you don't know what kind of file that is. If you go into your settings menu, Carlson configure, you get this big box up, go to this folder right here, project data folders, switch it temporarily without saving to project folder, and then choose this project, then choose the data type subfolders button. You get this list up. Now this list, and it's all sortable by alphabetically. If you just click on these particular headings, it's going to sort things. Click twice and it will change the sort order. So I'm looking for a .pro. So I'm going to scroll down here until I see my PRO. Right there it is. Okay. What is that file type? Well, I look over here and say, oh, it's a profile. Ah, okay, I see now. Or what's a PRJ? That's a ServNet project. What's a PRE? It's a geologic model. So the point is, all of these are described for you as what they are. And you see there's, in this case, 271. Different versions have slightly different numbers here. But at least in this one, I see that there are 271 different file types available. Now, that's not totally exhaustive, because if I look here under the H's, there is a file type called an HIS, which is a coordinate history file, and it's not listed here. The programmer's just neglected to put it in there. Yeah, so But for the most part, if you need to know what a file type is, you can use this as a little trick to switch it to project folder, look at your data type, find the file extension you're looking for, and you can read the description as to what it is. I'll just cancel, make sure it's sitting back on drawing folder and cancel and come back out of it. Okay. So that would be all of the stuff we need to know until we get to our general settings. And we'll come back and tackle this immediately after lunch. I'll try my hardest to make sure you don't go to sleep after a big heavy lunch. All right. So we'll come back and take a look at that and see what these do, because this part over here on the side is really important, these object linkings, to understand what they do and how they work. Okay, so we'll come back to that um, after lunch. At this point, any questions that come up? I would imagine nothing yet. It's just all boring background crap. Everybody good? All right, so let's come back. We'll start back. I'll give you your full hour. Let's start back at 25 till, in this case, for us, 25 till 2. For Fran, 25 till 1. So we'll come back um, at the 35 after mark. And that'll give us our full lunch break. Okay? So with that, I'm going to pause our recording. Or let me see. I'm going to actually, I want to stop my screen share. So when we do come back, you'll see me reshare my screen, and we'll get things started again. So I'm going to do my. Okay, so we're back where we left off. Hope everybody got a chance to get some sustenance and take care of some emails and phone calls and all that good stuff. So where we left off was talking about these settings, and we're going to talk about um, what these settings do and how they work with things in our drawing. So let's go to the settings menu and choose Carlson Configure. When this comes up, let's choose this button at the upper left called General Settings. And this is where we're going to focus here for a few minutes. In the left-hand column, we have some general settings here. The middle column, we've got these visual options and digitizer settings. And on the right-hand side, we've got coordinate file format, object linking, remove arcs, and some options for some, if we're using M-text or multi-line text. Okay, a lot of these you can leave as they are. I'm going to leave mine set here if you'd like to match them. I'm going to uncheck this use software rendering. If you're using a Windows computer, unlike me using a Mac and running through a Windows emulator, uncheck that so you can take advantage of your graphics card's hardware to accelerate your your rendering of your like 3D objects and such. I have to use software rendering on mine because the emulator does not actually give access to the physical hardware, and it's all interpreted. So that's why I have mine checked on, but you may match all of these if you'd like. And one that you might or might not care to use at the bottom is this use annotative scale. That's nothing that's required. I tend to do so with mine because I like to have my text defined as annotative and all of that. It will change the scaling accordingly. Okay, so let's see, what else do I? And, okay. All right, so Anyway, I'll leave this up here for you to match, and then we'll start to talk about these. All right, everybody have a chance to get those matched, and here we go. In the upper left, in that leftmost column, we're going to tell it whether or not we want to use that startup wizard. And that was the thing we stepped through when we first opened this new drawing. Okay, now if you're opening an existing drawing, it does not put you through that wizard. It's only when you start a new one. And again, like I said, I like to have it there because it forces me into setting up at least the minimum settings that I need to get my drawing underway. If you should happen to have checked the little box one time when you run it before that says skip this next time and you'd like to have it come back, this is where you turn it back on. As far as I know, it's the only place where you can do that. There may be something else, but I don't know it. The next two down are talked about log file recording. There's a report log and a drawing save log, and it basically just keeps a running text file of every report you generate. So if you list your file, list your points, and you run a volume report, all those different reports, it goes into that text file and stays there forever and ever. And it's really useful for eating up disk space. There's no real other point to it because you can always just rerun the report if you need to get that back. The drawing save log, again, just tells date and time when the drawing was last saved. Nothing I found very important. The save drawing INI files is pretty important. And what those files are things like this. And let me show you what I'm talking about here. Is we worked on a project. Let me go back to say summary training from yesterday. All right, so you're going to see some INI files here, and they are the same name as the drawing files. So if I look at, oh, what did we work on? The demo one, maybe. And these are all files that are associated with that. So if I find that demo one INI file, it is going to be right. Let's see here. Let's look at this one. I'll open it with text edit. So what this file is, see if I can get our visibility stuff. So this is a file that stores with your drawing file, and it tells you things like you can see the project path, the current cell file. So if you were using a cell library from a MicroStation standpoint, that would be akin to a block library. It tells you what was in use there. Here's a field to finish file that you might have been using called test.fld that holds field codes. It has a directory for my settings. That's my set dir. So it goes to settings. Here's my surface, demo1 ex, a temporary directory, a template directory, and then some triangulation file names. So these are all these different surfaces that I have been looking at and working with while I'm working with this file. Now, there's some other files, for instance, if I look at, oh, let's get us a bigger one, grading design. We'll open this one again. So you can see it keeps track of a lot more. Now, if I zoom into that, get it bigger so you can see what's in it. You can see it's just a running list. Here's some, there's a project path at one point, drawing design base, e.g. Here's a coordinate file that we used at at one point called my roadway design base -01 CRD. Here's a stationing file, a pro file. So this basically lists a bunch of files and maybe some folder locations. Up here's again there's pad1.tin, that's a surface. Phase 6 original ground, that's a surface. Here's my center line, Main Street. Got a grading design coordinate file. So here's where I switched to a different coordinate file from the one down here. So basically all this is doing is it keeps track of a bunch of different things that you've worked with that file. Again, not necessary to save them, but if you do, that makes a running list, sort of an audit trail of your work. So if you ever send this file to somebody else, or you go back and pick this file up later after working on it 6 months ago, it can, and if you're not finding certain other files and support information that it might need, you can always look at that file and it might show you if, oh yeah, I need that 10 file, but I renamed it or I moved it somewhere else. So you can go back and find it and then send that along with the package. So that's useful in my opinion. Now you can, and you can read what those others do that we don't have set, like set your settings to match your drawing directory. Otherwise, I keep my settings all in a central location so I can get to it from any project I'm working on. Um, and it ignores zero elevations. Now, what that means is when you are modeling surfaces, if that is set on, then anything you select in the drawing that you want to use to build your surface from has to have a non-zero elevation. Otherwise, even if it's selected, it will just be ignored. So it's very useful for most of us. The only exception might be if you happen to be working on a project that's situated along the coast or it is down near sea level, where it's very possible to have something with a true zero elevation that you do want to include. So if you have that unchecked, then you need to be careful and not select the things that you don't want to go into defining the surface, but you could also include those that do have a zero elevation. So it's just a convenient switch for most of us who are not working down at the seashore. Now, I know one of the Carlson trainers actually says, no, you can leave that turned on, excuse me, all the time, because you're never going to have anything at exactly zero elevation. It might be 0.001 or something like that, but it'll have some non-zero elevation. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes you actually do get a zero elevation that is a legitimate elevation. So, but for the most part, if you have any kind of relief at all, even, below 100, but it's above your sea levels, um, you can safely leave that on and it will ignore those. Now that again is settable in the middle of those commands, like when you're building a surface, you can turn it on and off inside of that as well. This is just a default condition. The next three that are checked, the D view twist angle, that's our display view twist angle, means that if we want to change, let's say if our site is running mostly southwest to northeast, but we want to look at it sort of going left to right across our screen, And we can set that twist angle to match a line or a certain direction in the bulk of our data. And it doesn't change us out of our coordinate system. It just twists the view. So that's why we're going to use that. Then our dimension scale and A units are two CAD variables, and we're going to have them set to what we tell it our drawing scale is. The A units is what are called alternate units in our dimensioning. So it will always match up with our drawing scale. It's just a bit of a safeguard. And you can set another variable called PD size to your symbol size, and that's not one we use very much. We'll see where that is a little bit later. It's just the point display size that governs the display of the CAD points, not the Carlson points and their symbols, but the CAD point itself. And we're going to set our insert units to unitless unless we know we always are inserting architectural drawings, for instance, and we would go in another place and set our insertion units to inches. But right now, if it's unitless, it reads it, brings it in as if it matched ours. And if we needed to rescale it, we could do that at that particular time if we're inserting data into the drawing. Now, you can also have it set your user coordinate system to world on startup. I don't generally have that set because it also, unless you've physically changed it, and if it's a new drawing, it's going to always be set to world coordinates to begin with. These user coordinate systems are just alternately defined systems of coordinates. You can start an origin location, say on the corner of a building, and have it go, the positive X direction might be along the front wall of the building. So architects do that all the time. We tend to always work in world coordinates, which means it's exactly what it is supposed to be like on the ground. And if we need to rotate it, we'll do our twist angle up here to set our view rotation. All right. Um, these other checks are, again, just to set those variables to match. We don't generally need to do that. I always check my LT scale variable and set it to 1 when they come in. Again, I'm going to have use software rendering on it. You should not, unless you have any kind of problem with your visual software and it gives you errors. And then we're going to enable our file selection graphic preview. That's when we go to open files, it gives that little window of a little preview so we can make sure we're on the right one. We'll use a dialog for our selection set filters, and that lets us set if we're going to build a selection set based on filtering, it pops up a dialog box and we can say, select only things on these layers or this color or these particular types. Otherwise, we have to control all that from the command line. So we'll turn that on and we'll manage our workspaces automatically. So if we switch into a different workspace, which is something we rarely do, and we make changes to it, and that's the arrangement of the toolbars and menus and such, then it will automatically save those and take care of those for us. And then this last one, which I said is something you may or may not want to use, is this annotation scale. And that's going to set our drawing annotation scaling to whatever scales are either pre-built in the drawing or anything that we've added when we do a drawing setup. And then I told it to use a prefix of inch mark equals, our inch mark space equal sign space, and then our suffix is a foot mark. So if I change it to 1 inch equals 40 feet, it's going to say 1 inch mark space equal space 40 foot mark. Okay, so as far as the listing in here, that's how they show up. You see those three up there. And those suffixes and prefixes don't matter at all. You can see right now they're shown as ratios down below, but I like to see those set up here. Now, it won't hurt anything to leave your set on. It won't hurt anything to leave it set off. It's just a matter of how, if you get into annotation scaling, which is a different, more advanced CAD topic, if you don't know what's involved with that, um, I'm going to suggest that to further study. And you can find that out from some other, YouTube videos or the help system and such. Okay, so that's our left column. Our right or center column is how we want to view certain things, reports, etc. So we want to report our coordinates in our survey comfortable order of northing and then easting. Otherwise, it reverses that so it matches the CAD aware coordinate system, which is X first and then Y. So that would be east, which is our X axis first, and then north second would be our Y axis. So we're going to report them as northings and eastings as opposed to X's and Y's. Date format, just use whatever Windows has. Our document format, when we generate special reports, we can kick that out to either a PDF or a DWF, which is an Autodesk early attempt at trying to make a PDF-like output format. Never really caught on anywhere because of the popularity of PDFs, but you can use it if you want. Make your PDFs read only, you get all that bit. Now we have a report viewer. So anytime we run a report, we can either view it in the Carlson viewer or in Windows Notepad or Microsoft Word. If you've got it installed, it will go out and run those two programs and load the report up into those items. The Carlson report viewer I like because it has a number of controls on it that allow me to do things like copy the report into my drawing as if I had typed in a bunch of text to label in my drawing. So maybe you list your coordinate points and you want to make a table of coordinates. Well, just run the report, list your points, and then hit the old, store in the drawing button, and it will plop it right down into the drawing as if you had just issued a standard mtext command from AutoCAD. The dialog font, that's whatever font you choose that you want to see in your dialog boxes. I would recommend just leaving it like its default setting. And then for digitizer settings, I don't know the default. It might be unchecked or not. And if it is unchecked, then or if it's unchecked and you turn these tablets on and such, if you see, this grays out when it's unchecked because it's looking for a digitizer. I don't have one attached to my computer, so it doesn't allow me to do this. But I'm just going to use a mouse, and this means instead of any command that I would use that might require me to digitize something, it lets me just use my mouse and digitize it from the screen. I don't have to have a physical mouse or physical digitizing tablet. I would say most of us do not have one of those um, in our use any further. If you do, then you would uncheck that and choose your puck layout. Moving to the rightmost column, we have several formats available for our coordinate files. We have the old original numeric only, which meant our points could only have point numbers to identify them. If we say alphanumeric, our points can not only have numbers, which is what we typically use, but we can also mix in letters with that. So for instance, if I've got a series of points, say 101, 102, 103, and maybe for whatever reason, I needed a point that I wanted to see in my listings or in my sequence of point drawing commands. If I wanted a point between 102 and 103, if I create another point, if I said 104 and then I said draw line, draw a line between these points, it would go 101, 102 to 103 and 104. But if I wanted 104 to be located, say, midway between 102 and 103, it would go out to 103 and then double back on itself to set number 104. Well, in that particular case, I might want to say 101, 102, 103, and if I need to put a point in between them, I might call that one 102A and then 102B. So that gives me that flexibility that I can insert specific point numbers and give them other letters. Also, control stations typically might have names instead of numbers. So that switch alphanumeric is generally our default condition. Now there's a special variant of that one called SQLite or SQLite. You'll hear people call it. That's structured query language light. It uses a SQL database as the file to store it in, and it's just going to put an extension on it of CRDB, the B meaning base or database. And all that really does for us as far as convenience is it allows us, if we're say a surveyor and we not only collect the points locations and X, Y, and Z, and maybe its description, it also lets us gather up things like any kind of GIS data, like say I shoot a manhole and maybe one of the fields I might want to see a field of, say, utility type. Is it storm? Is it sanitary? Is it electric? I might put date of last inspection, or I might put a, condition assessment, poor, fair, new, anything like that, all that additional GIS data. And if I do that, it captures all that information and keeps it with the point in that same single file. Now, I can still capture all that information using the alphanumeric format, but it just keeps it in a separate file, same name, but a .gis extension to hold that data. And so it just relates those two files. And that's generally what we typically would see. Okay, but if we use that CRD, if we do a lot of GIS work, we might consider using that format because it gives us access to that data directly from within the coordinate file. Then you have the two that were used with the old C&G survey system that we don't need to fool with if we're not using that. Now I'm going to skip over the object linking portion here just for a second and talk about this remove arcs methodology down below. I have two methods to reduce an arc to the approximated segmented result. I can either choose a maximum offset value or a chord length value. And that means if I've got something that is a true arc and I need to represent it as individual straight line chords, this governs how small to make those chords. So a maximum offset and a chord length. And I'll illustrate that here in just a second. Okay. The MTeX label options, the maximum width for a piece of MTeX when you're generating labels, you could specify that or leave it set to 0 so it will be as wide as it needs to be. So that's generally where we leave it. All right, so have everything set like this, and we're going to talk about this maximum offset and the chord length arc reduction method and see what's going on with that. And we'll pop in and out of this and let it go. So right now we have a maximum offset of 0.02 and a chord length of 0.25. And I would recommend something along those values. Now what this means is this. I'll show you physically what's going on. With these set like this, I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to choose exit. Now, let's draw a polyline. So I'm going to go to my draw menu and I'm going to choose 2D polyline. And I'm going to not have anything set up here, I will check on to just use the current drawing properties, the current layer, color, etc. I'll say okay. And just out here in space, I'm going to click a point with my left mouse button. I'm going to let it up. You see a rubber band go along, and I'm going to set this at, let's make this say 50 feet long. Now to make that 50 feet, down below here, I've got a distance option. So I'm going to say D for distance. It now prompts me to enter a distance. I'm going to say 50, and I'll hit enter. So now it knows it's going to draw something 50 feet long, but it wants to know the direction. And I can either go to wherever my cursor is pointing, or I can follow an existing line that might be there, or I can pick 2 points that show the direction, or I can specify a specific angle. So let's choose that as a method. Let's go angle. And now it asks for an angle code, 1 through 9. Well, what do those codes mean? Well, look at the line above our prompt. 1, 2, 3, and 4 are our 4 quadrants. So if I knew a bearing that I needed to match, I would choose that as my code. So let's say if we go along, let's say we go north 30 degrees, 15 minutes, 45 seconds east. So that code would be quadrant 1. Notice the other ones are 1 through 4 are the quadrants, 5 is the azimuth, 6 and 7 are angle left, angle right, and then 8 and 9 are deflection angle left, deflection angle right, as if you're surveying and you're looking at a backside and you're set in the next direction. So I'm going to go northeast, so that's my code. And I'm going to do that at, what did I say, 30 degrees, 15 minutes, 45 seconds. So I would type 30.1545. So I'm going 30 degrees decimal. You see the format shows you go DD decimal minutes, minutes, seconds, seconds. And if you had fractional seconds after that, you could just keep typing the numbers. But that's all I need. I'll hit enter. Okay, there it went. Now, it may have gone off the screen or you may barely see it. Just use the wheel on your mouse, zoom it in and out. So now I can see, all right, so there's about my 50-foot length, or that's exactly my 50-foot length. And it's sitting there and it's waiting for my next input. I'm still in distance mode. You see down at the command line, it says enter distance, and I can choose these different units, meters, feet, chains, lengths, rods, or I could pick a particular distance that I wanted to go. But right now, and the option that is shown with the angle brackets around it, in this case, feet, that's going to be what is going to be used. If I wanted to switch units, I would choose a different units by typing those letters or clicking that option. But in this case, I don't really want to go a particular distance. I want to go back and put in an arc that's going to come after this edge. So I need to quit my distance entering mode. So I'm going to choose the quit button. That doesn't quit my drawing. It just quits that particular subsystem, the distance entering system. So now I want to enter an arc. So I'll choose arc. Okay, so now I can just pick it wherever it's going to go. Or if you know where the radius point is, the radius length, an arc length, chord, or a second point along the thing, you get the idea. So let's give it a radius length. If I click that, it wants to know that. Let's give it a 25-foot radius. And now which direction, left to right? So if I go to the right, I just type R or click that or just hit enter. There's my 25-foot radius curved to the arc. And now I want to go instead of, you know, I need to specify the end of this because it sets that it's going to the right. So let's just graphically set that particular point. So I'll just click a point there and now it's ready to go again. And so at this time, I want to type, well, let's do another D for distance. Let's do this one another feet. Direction method. And let's just say well, I don't care. Let's just pick. We'll say P for pick. So pick the direction. I'm just going to go over here now and specify. Now, I'm not going to be tangent at this point. I could have forced my tangency if I wanted, but I'll come over here and just eyeball it being tangent. I've done that, and I'll go back to quit my distance. And then if I'm done drawing, I'm going to hit enter to finish. Okay. Now, a couple of things to do real quick now. We have a two-dimensional polyline. It has an elevation. I look over here in my properties tab, and if you don't see that properties tab, right-click the mouse and choose properties, and this will pop up. You can dock it on the side like mine if you'd like. I leave mine up because I use it all the time. And you could give that a specific elevation. Now, that's the elevation all the way along that line, and it still stays two-dimensional. All right, well, what we're going to be working with is a series of three-dimensional things. So this, if this were, say, the edge of a driveway or edge of a road, and then it comes and turns into a parking lot. Okay, and this is a circular arc. We measured that arc. It was a 25-foot radius arc. And we come up here and we got this continuing on into here. So in real life, instead of this starting down here at some elevation and staying that elevation, it's going to be some elevation here, maybe a change along the way. And then when the arc starts, it's be an elevation, maybe some changes along the way. And then where it ends would have an elevation. Then where it finally ends would be another elevation. Okay, so that would be a three-dimensional polyline at that point. But here's the difference. When I select this and I see these grips and I see I've got my arc with only the two grips on it and a midpoint grip, I know that that's part of a circular arc because all I need to define that piece are the two endpoints and the location of the midpoint where that arc goes. And that's defined by the equation of that circle. Now, if I were to give that some elevation, if you think about this, if you're out there on the ground, you're looking straight down on it, and you started the elevation back here at, say, 100 feet, and you got up here where the curve starts, and you said that was 101 feet, and you got where the curve ended, and you said that was 102 feet, and then over here, you ended in the parking lot at 103 feet. Okay, very simple step up through these elevations. So what happens when you're looking at this in plan view, that is part of a circle. If you were to raise this piece of the arc, you grab that point and you raise it up to 102 feet or 101 foot, whatever we said it was, and you come over to this end and you pick that one up and you raised it up higher to 102 feet, well, that's no longer an arc. Or even still, let's say it started at 101, it went up to here and it dropped to 100, came up to here and went to 102, came down here, dropped to 99, and it came back to 100. We would not see that in our plan view. It would still look like an arc, but in truth, let's say even if we just raise the endpoints, we had this one at 101, we raise this to 102, it's now in a tilted plane. And so if we look at that perpendicular to that tilted figure, it's no longer an arc. It has technically been stretched out in that horizontal plane. We don't see it because we're looking still in our original plan view. So what that means is it's no longer part of that circular definition. And so Carlson needs a way to turn that into some approximation of what that arc would be as it changes those elevations. And the only way it can do that is to replace that original. Hold on a minute here. I've got to get back. Uh, let's see, give me a quick second here. I've got to. Nicolette. All right. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so when we need to represent that with some different approximations, because it's no longer an arc, the only way we can do that is to put a series of connected straight line segments that follow along that pathway. And we want to try to approximate it as closely as we can to the original circle. Okay. Now you're going to see this and you're going to, in practice, you're going to do things like, let's say if this were in fact a road into a parking lot with a little curb return there, you want to keep the original 2Ds so that you can dimension this arc and display on the drawing what the radius is and all of that kind of stuff. But when you're modeling the surface, you want to then use that as a three-dimensional thing, which is going to get rid of the arc and it's going to replace it with those series of connected chords. And that's where those settings are going to apply. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this original file, or this original drawing rather, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to say edit, copy, and I'm just going to copy it to a different layer. And so it says select the entities to copy. I'll select that. It wants to know the layer to copy to. I'm going to put it on this layer called final, and it's going to show up as red. All right, so that's fine. I have two things here. I'm going to select my original, and I'm going to give it some additional line weight so that you can see it. And we'll keep that for comparison's sakes. I'll take this final now and I'll put it in front. So it's now actually there. I don't know if you can actually see it when we get to it, but in any case, it's there. It's no longer a circle. Now, I mean, it's a copy. It's no longer the original. One stacked right on top of the other. So let's convert that file into a 3D polyline by giving it some elevations. So I'm going to go to my, uh, let's see, I don't know what module you guys might have. If you are in Civil, you would choose the 3D menu. Jack, I think you have Takeoff, in which you would go to you would be in uh, construction. So you would go to Elevate. It's where you would find this command. If you have Survey, I don't know that you have this as an option necessarily. Doesn't matter right now, but just follow along. I just want to show you what the software is going to do when it needs to do this function. Okay. So I'm going to go to my 3D data menu. I'm going to change this from a 2D to a 3D, and I'm going to do it by start and end elevation. And so pick the center line. So I'm going to select that red one that I copied. And it wants to know the elevation here. Well, let's use the examples we had. Let's say I had a 101. And it went to 101 and changed all the way up here. Let's call this, say it went to 103. Okay. And now it asks for another one. I'm going to hit enter. So now if I look at this, I'm going to zoom way in tight here. And let me get this red one and also give it some line weight so you can see it. All right, so there's my red one, and I see the white one as well. I'm going to type REA to do a regeneration so you can see this as a true circle. So if I select this white one. I click on it, it's selected. I'm going to zoom out and you're going to see the grips show up like it originally did. I've got the endpoint, the midpoint, the endpoint, the midpoint, the endpoint, the midpoint, the endpoint. That center section is still the circle. If I select this red one, this is the resulting 3D approximation of that original plan view arc. And let's zoom out and see it. You see I've got an endpoint, an endpoint, 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 endpoint. So it's replaced the arc with a series of chords. Okay, and so here's what those values mean. If I have my setting for my, let's go to my settings, Carlson configure, general settings. I'm telling it to use this maximum offset value, and it's going to use this value of 2/100ths of a foot. That means when it needs to convert that, it's going to put in however many of these little chorded segments it needs, such that the maximum deviation from the original curved arc is going to be 0.02 feet or less. The other option is the chord length, in which case it says, I'm going to represent this arc with a series of chords that have a length of, in my case, 0.25 feet. So that's how it has done that particular operation. Okay. Now to see the varying, I'm going to undo all that. Let me come back and grab that. Let me undo it again. Yeah, I'm back now to a 2D polyline. I'm going to give that some weight so you can see it here. So there's now the two original and one right on top of the other one. So now if I change those numbers, Carlson configure general settings, let's change the method to use the chord length, and let's make that chord length 2 feet instead of a quarter foot. Okay. So now if I do that very same thing, I'm going to turn it into a 3D polyline by start and stop elevations. I'll pick my polyline. I'll give it 101. I'll give it 103. And now it has done that. And I zoom in here. I'll do another regen. There's my original arc. Here's my converted polyline. I look down here and I hover in that grip and I look down at my status line. I see that indeed that has elevation 101. There's an elevation of 103, and then here's all of those intervening elevations along the way, which are between 101 and 103, apportioned across there. Now, if I look at the distance for that segment, I'm going to come here and just choose a regular distance. I'll snap to that endpoint, snap to that endpoint, and you see that distance is 2. That was that segmented distance, okay? Let's undo that one more time. Go back to it. And if I were to change this, let's go back to my settings, Carlson configure, general settings. And if we had this number set to, let's say this time instead we use 10. And then if we did this 2D to 3D, choose this. And we said 101 to 103. Now you can see it doesn't approximate it all that well. Each of those segments is now 10 feet long, and then however many left over till it gets back to where it needs to go. So this is the implications of all of that. Now, I'm going to go back and reset my method, Carlson configure, general settings. I'm going to choose the maximum offset method instead of the chord length. And I'll put this back to where I had it before, but I'm going to choose, if I were to do this again, the new segments would be no more than 0.02 feet away from the midpoint of that little piece of arc. Okay, that's how that applies. But here's the implications of it. If I do this, well, let's do it, let's do this one more time. Let's just delete that and copy it. Layer here to final. We'll select it and give it, there it is, it's set to 0.5. Okay, so now if I were to have something that, you saw the one where it had the 10 feet. Let me do one more time. All right, so there's the one that we did set to the 10 feet. I'm going to change its color just to keep them separate. All right. So now if I change this and I have a settings to where my Carlson configure general settings, let's say I thought, well, if I make it 2/100ths off the arc, what if I make it really close to the arc? All right, so I could do that. And if I repeated my 2D to 3D, I'll pick that red arc, 101 to 103, and it did it. Now I've got this one in here now. If I choose the red one, look at how many segments I have in that line compared to how many segments I have in this yellow line. So I've got 3 segments in the arc here. I've got, I don't know how many, 100 or more along here. Now, what the implications of that mean is this. When you're dealing with 3D line work and you've elevated these lines, if I choose this yellow line, you can see the grips. That's how many vertices I have. Each one of those vertex locations, each one of those vertices is going to be the corner of a triangle when it builds a surface out of all the other 3D data. It goes to each of those points and tries to find another point to connect to make a piece of a surface, a little triangle that it's going to use. So here I'm going to have just 3 triangles here. But if I choose this file, this one instead, I'm going to have each one of those, you're going to generate, thousands of additional little triangles that are really kind of unnecessary. You don't need it to be quite that tight. So you need a good happy medium. And that's, again, what I'm going to generally come back and said, I have found that if I go within 2/100ths of a foot off that circle, I'm close enough by coordinates, and select that one now, get rid of it, and copy this again to my final. Select it. Right there, it's good. So I have found when I do that, let's go to my 2D to 3D by start and end. I'll pick my red one. Start at 101, go to 103. It's done. And now when I select this red line, you can see the number of triangles that will form here are going to be considerably fewer than all of those hundreds of points, yet it's going to be more defined than if I only had these 3 big, larger triangles. I have seen projects actually where they had these numbers set too tight or too loose, and they would replicate that curve in 2D. I would see this 3D line come up to the corner and just do across to the midpoint and out to the end point. So just one point along there and not actually represent that properly. It's still, I still see the original arc, but I haven't represented the true data closely enough in some cases. Sometimes it's more closely than I need. So what happens is when I build that into a model, and if I were to go out there and then try to put that model on a thumb drive and put it on a bulldozer and use it for machine control and go out there and grade this structure, it would actually build along these straight line segments. And as you could see, my curb return here would not be very smooth. It would be, a little bit weird. And it would also be a little too coarse to represent any subtle changes along here because I'm restricting the triangles to only be connected to those points. So that's the implication of that and why we want to sort of find that happy medium. And those are the numbers that I find to be the most useful. Okay. So now let's go back to the settings, Carlson configure general settings, and let's talk about this linking section. This is the important part to sort of get to know. What these mean is, or you can read what they are. It's a link to points with the coordinate file, link line work with points, link labels with the line work, link line work with the center lines, and I can group my point entities and I can maintain the coordinate history file. So any changes I make to my coordinates, I'm going to keep a running tab of that history that I can undo. If I group the point entities, if I grab any part of the point, like the point number, the point elevation, description, the symbol, it's going to grab everything as a single group so I can manipulate it easier if I need to do that. Now, these links, though, mean if I link points with the coordinate file, well, the points are in the coordinate file, but if I put them in the drawing, I've got some points in the drawing. They correspond to points in the coordinate file. I may not have drawn all the points in the drawing, but if I then were to move a point in the coordinate file, it will automatically update the values that are stored in the coordinate file. Likewise, if I go and change the coordinate file position, it will come back to the drawing and move that point to that new location for me if those are linked. Now, this is less important in the newer versions because now, regardless of what is set for that, it always gives you a little warning that says, hey, you're in a different position now. Do you want to synchronize them or do you want to update one from the other? Linking line work with points, and we'll get to see that in a minute, is if I draw line work by defining the points along that line as coming from my CRD points, my coordinate file points, then if those point locations should change, it's going to pull the line work with it. So if I move the point, the line will automatically update and follow that point, as long as that linking was on when I did it. Same thing with labels. If I label the bearing and distance and the curve radius and the area of a closed figure or something like that, if I should change those lines that created that figure, it's going to erase the old labels, recompute, and redraw new labels along that line work. Line work linked with center lines is a special case where if I've drawn a polyline and then turned that into a center line, so I now have a center line file that's out in my directory. If I should change the line work by just grip editing the line in my drawing, it's going to automatically open up that centerline file and make changes to it to match what my drawing has. Likewise, if I go into my centerline file editor where I'm just working with the numbers, save and exit, it's going to come back to my drawing, erase the old one, and redraw the new centerline. Okay, now here's the part that's important to remember. These links work Oh, good. Let me see something here a minute. Okay, no, I've got it going. All right, so these lines or these links actually work in this fashion. They work at the time that you do any of these options. If you create a line and then label it, or if you create a line to go through points, it's whatever this is set to at the time that that entity is created that governs its behavior. So let's say I've got link line work with points is on. I draw some line work going through some points, and then I come back and I don't want that anymore, so I turn it off. Well, then if I make another line going through some points, that line's not linked. But the previous line that I did draw when this was set will still be linked. So these apply as to whatever their setting is at the time the object was created, either a label or a piece of line work or something. And further, if I'm working on a file and I have this link line work with points turned on, and I create my line work and go through a number of points so that if the point moves, the line's going to move with it, and I save my file, and then I send that down to, John Doe over at the next office, and he's going to work on the file a while, but he doesn't have that linking on, and he thinks of every time he draws line works, it's not going to follow the lines. So when he gets my file, and if he starts working with those points, they're going to move the line I've already created because I had the linking on when I made the file, when I made the object. He picks up the file, opens it. He doesn't have linking on, but it doesn't apply to the line that I've already created. It's only to the things that he creates that's going to read what he has linked on. So in that regard, it's pretty important that everybody in your organization probably should have these set to be the same way, or at least be aware of it. Okay, so if something behaves differently and you don't want it to behave that way, you know why perhaps that it was done. Okay, and let's say I created a figure, and we're gonna do this with some examples here. So let's go ahead and let's turn these all on and say okay, and we'll say exit. Okay, and so now I want you to go out here and let's draw a figure. We're going to draw, let's just draw a rectangle. So I'm going to pull the draw menu down and choose rectangle. And I'm just going to, it says select the first corner of my rectangle. So I'm going to click here. Now I'm going to set the other corner of my rectangle. Well, I'm going to set this to be a specific distance. I want this to be 100 feet wide and 50 feet tall. So when it's asking me for a point, which I would typically just click, I can also down here on the command line, I can simply type in a symbol at, which means from my previously picked point, go so many units on the x-axis, that's my 100, comma, so many units on my y-axis, and that's going to be that corner. And if I were doing it in 3D, I could type a comma and put the Z value, but I'm just going to say, so from the previous point, go 100 units to the east or in the X direction, 50 feet to the north or in the Y direction. I hit enter, and now there it is. It's way off my screen. I'll just wheel the mouse in or even double click the mouse, which zooms to everything. And there's now my resulting figure. If I select it, I got some grips, I can change it, do different things, but I can also do some measurements here. Let's go to the inquiry menu and just choose a standard distance. And it says starting point for the distance. So I'm going to select here, and I get that little endpoint showing right there because I've got my snaps on. So I'm going to snap to that endpoint. I'm going to snap to that endpoint. And I see down here on my command line above, it says that was 100 units. And I picked it here, went down here, and it's 50 units. So that indeed made a 100 by 50 foot rectangle. Now, suppose that's somebody's lot in a subdivision or something, and we wanted to measure it. So let's go to, and I'm going to switch to, first of all, let me sort of poll the audience here. What, now I know that Jack, you've got the takeoff, the construction module. What do the rest of you all have? Do you have civil or survey or both or what? Just just unmute and let me know.
I've got survey.
Okay.
Survey.
Survey, survey,
Survey.
survey. Jack and Sarah.
Same.
Okay, survey for Sarah. Jack, we said had takeoff. Yeah, you've got takeoff. What about you, Scott? What is the menu, Scott? What is your menu beyond your points menu? What's the first menu you see past points?
I think Scott wrote survey.
Oh, thank you, Scott. I forgot. Let me turn my chat back on. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Yeah, and Sarah, you have another one there too. All right, I'll try to keep this up now where I can see. So can I give an example where you might want to unlink the points from the line work? Yes, we'll talk about that in just a second. All right, so here's how this linking might work with our labels. So I'm going to be in my survey module. I'll try to keep everything there. And let me see, Jack, if you are in construction, you want to go to you have an annotate menu, so you'll be fine there. So go to the annotate menu and let's choose auto annotate. And this time, without getting into all the particulars of how this annotates along a figure, just choose OK, take the defaults, select your figure and hit enter. And you should see it show up something like that. Maybe they're side by side, maybe the distance is above and the bearings are below or whatever. Okay, it doesn't matter. You should see something like that. Now, select that rectangle, get the grips on, and just hover over one of the corners, click on it with the mouse, and stretch it up so it's going to be distorted, and watch what happens. So that is what linking labels with line work is going to do. In fact, it will even do it sort of when you add points. So I'm going to add a vertex to this line here. So it split that line. And maybe I'm going to put it out here. It's going to recompute. Now, notice what happened. This line went away because I originally only had 4 labels. So when I added a new segment, it wrapped itself around. Now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, but I don't have this one done. So how would you resolve a situation like that is you just simply go back to auto annotate again. And in our auto annotate settings, we have go to my general settings. I have my previous labels set to erase. So now if I just repeat it, it will repeat it for all the segments in my figure. Okay. So that's an example of the label linking being on. Now, if I were to, I'm going to select this, right click, copy. I'll just drag a copy out here. And now I'm going to go to settings, Carlson configure, general settings, and I'm going to unlink labels with line work. Say OK. Say exit. And now if I auto annotate that one, they'll match. And now, however, if I should happen to change this figure, it did not update. Okay. Now, again, what are these annotations? They're really, if I select it and look at my properties, it's just a piece of text or in text in our case. There's nothing special about it other than Carlson keeps track of the fact that it was associated with that line. And now when I've done this move, I've kept these original values, even though I've changed this a bit. Now this is enough to see. And if I wanted to recompute that, I would just go back and repeat my auto annotate so that it annotates my figure. Now, this gets into the same situation about whether I would want to, I'm going to turn my settings back on. Oh, by the way, that linking is now undone. But if I do this, see, it's still linked because that was, the linking was on at the time that I did the labels. So that's, again, part of that behavior. I'm going to now turn it back on. Now, the question that Sarah asked was an example of why you might want to unlink. And in her case, unlink the line work that followed points. So it also applies to things like labels here. And think about this in terms of being a survey, and this is somebody's property. Okay. So if I've drawn my line work and I've gone through some points that maybe I've created based on my deed descriptions. Okay. And then maybe I've gone out and I've actually surveyed on the ground and I found those points that I'm pretty sure are the right points, but they're in oh so slightly different configurations. Maybe it's, you know, maybe instead of this being up here where it used to be, it's actually down here. Now this is exaggerated because it's enough to move it and you can see it. But if I then move that point from up there down to here to represent where it is in the field, my original line would still have been drawn up here to where my deed said it was, and all my labels according to my deed descriptions. And so it would keep that geometry of the drawn line work as well as my labels. If they were unlinked, they would not follow those little point changes, but stay with where they were originally created. Because for whatever reason, whatever, you know, deed evidence or evidence on the ground, you might want to make sure they don't change. Now, here's part of the danger of not knowing that. I was teaching a survey company down in Charlotte. This has been a number of years ago, probably close to 15. And the one setting we had here with that linking was link points with coordinate file, yes or no. And this was before they used to pop up that little warning message to tell you that. And so the survey manager caught on to how this was behaving. He says, oh my goodness, everybody get up right now. We're all in the training room on laptops. And he said, get up right now, go back to your office and tell me what your settings are. So I went back and checked and came back. Some of them had that link on, some of them did not. And they all worked on the same files. And he goes, oh my gosh, that explains our last lawsuit. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, some of our surveyors work with that link turned off, or they're not aware of the link and maybe it was off. And when they bring a bunch of points in from the coordinate file, maybe a whole bunch of points clustered around one location, and they decide that's the corner of the property. So they drew their line up there and they got to that point. But then they wanted to see the drawing a little clearer. So they go down here and their thinking is, well, I know my point locations in my CRD file. You know, that's my holy scripture. That's where those points are. So I'm just going to grab these points in the drawing. I'm going to shove them off to the side and get them out of the way a little bit. Okay. Now it wasn't much, just enough to clear up his view. But if he's working on this and somebody else created that figure and they had this, or just even just the points, and if they had the linking on, when he moved the point up, it changed the value back in the CRD file. He wasn't aware of it. He thought that was the good value. And then all I need to do is just redraw the points and they'll come back to where they were. And so you can imagine now the movements he's doing are very small. They're not going to realize it, but when they followed and he wasn't aware of it, it changed the bearings and distances and area of the property, and they wound up doing some improper surveys. Okay, so you need to be aware of the behavior that is in play at the time these things are created. And there's nothing that I can do. I can't look at this text and look at some properties and see that, okay, linking was on when it was made, or I can't look at the line that says, okay, you're linked to points or not. You just have to be aware that they're going to be behaving in the fashion they or based on the link setting when it was created. Okay, so just be aware of that, and that's the importance of that linking part. Now, I'm going to clear all that out and then show you that center line work. I'm just going to go here and I'm going to draw a center line here. I'm going to just draw a polyline. Okay. So this is on this layer called existing, and it has a dashed setting. I need to set one more setting. MSLT scale be on. T scales that we want. Go. Let me do one more quick thing here just for visualization standpoint. So my existing, I'm going to make -2, and I'll give it a weight so you can see it a little better screen. All right, so there's a polyline that I drew, and you can see the endpoints, where it created. Now I can turn that into an alignment, and it could be an alignment that's the way it is. Maybe those are manhole locations, and that's the alignment of my sewer line. But so what I want to do is I'm going to go to my centerline menu, and I'm going to choose polyline to centerline file. So it's going to first ask me for a centerline file to write. So I'm going to give it a file name. Now I look up here in my top and I see I'm in my folder, right where I intend to be, because that was set in my earlier stuff. But I'm just going to call this one, let's call it Classy Avenue. All right, just for yucks. So that's going to be my road alignment. Okay, and so it says on my command line, select the polyline that represents the center line. I'm going to select it. Gives me a chance to change directions if I need. I'm going to just take the default. Everything's good. Starting with station 00. It gave me some numbers and says press enter to continue, so I do. Now, that's not very good alignment to drive along. If I drive up here, I got to stop, put the brakes on, crank my steering wheel. You get the idea. So I need some curves in here. Now, the standard CAD way of doing those curves is to fillet those two sections. So here's what I want to show you about the linking. If I do another, I'm going to draw another polyline that looks sort of similar to it. I'm just going to sort of parallel it up here. Okay. Now, if I double click that new polyline that I just drew, I'm going to double click it, and it gives me a little shortcut. It knows that I probably want to edit it, so it puts me in this command down here at the bottom called edit polyline. That's the standard CAD p-edit command. Okay. But because I turned this one into a centerline file, when I double click it, it's going to load up the Carlson centerline file editor. I'll exit that. And that's the same as if I chose centerline editor, second command down. I find the file. There's my little preview. I hit open. So that's exactly the same thing, just a shortcut. And that's because, and there's nothing special about this. When I look at its properties, it's still just a polyline. Okay. So if I want to put some curves in here, let's do that. I'm going to use a standard command on my edit menu. I'm going to choose fillet. So when I do that, it wants to know a radius value. Right now, the current settings say that the radius is 0. So I'm going to type R for radius. And I'm going to give that a value. I'm going to say, I think 25 feet will show us something. So I'll say 25. I'll hit enter. It now says select the first entity. So I'm going to pick this incoming leg and this outgoing middle segment here. And it put a radius in there of 25 feet. Okay. Now, double click this line. It goes into my centerline file editor. So you see the linking took any changes I made to that drawn figure in my drawing and automatically reflected it in my centerline editor. So there's the line, there's that curve, and if I sit on curve and either hit the edit button below or I double click it, I can change some values to it. So let's say instead of a 25-foot radius, I want it instead a 15-foot radius. I say okay, and when I say save and then exit, watch the screen. You see what it did is it kept the endpoints and the PI points, but it made it smaller. Likewise, I'll go back to my editor and notice when I double click it, it selects that particular piece of it. But I'm going to sit right here, just like I did a fillet with my CAD tool. I've got tools in my editor, and that's going to be, if I sit at this tangent, I want to fit a curve between where I'm sitting and the next element. So I'm going to fit a curve in between there, and let's give that one a radius of, say, 20 feet. And we'll say, okay. And so that's going to put that in there and shorten that little segment up here. I'll say save and exit, and there it is. If I select that, I see the segment, I see the arc, I see the segment, the tangent piece, the arc, and the tangent piece as well. So that's how that linking works with center lines. And again, because that's turned on. So you can decide when and where you may want to turn these on and off. I generally find them useful to have them on all the time. But again, I'm the only person working on production files in my company because I'm the only member of my company. So just be aware, find out what your colleagues are using, maybe decide everybody's going to set them the same, but just be aware of how that works. Okay? Everybody good with that? Now, let me ask Scott, you had a problem before getting your files to open, you said. So let's take a look at what might be happening with that. And I have a couple of thoughts, and maybe it's something that's real easy to get past. So Scott, if you will, and you can all try this, but go to the file menu and choose open. And scroll to the location of the data that you downloaded. And you should see a list of files in it, or even hit the browse button and you'll be out in the Windows location. Here I'm at my Drive C, Carlson Projects, Fundamentals Training, Data Sets for Fundamentals class, and here's my files. So you should see something like that. And if you see this one called Sample from T3 Global, I want you to try to open that. Now, do not pick the one, if you see them, don't pick the one that says period underscore sample from T3 Global. If you happen to see that in there, just pick the sample from T3 Global and choose open, and then come back to this dialog box and hit open again, and you should get that. Let me know, Scott, what you see. Oh, you don't have a version of Carlson. We'll have to switch to the work computer. Oh, Okay. So that's why you need those data set files are going to be working with Carlson. Are you able to switch to that work computer now while you're connected to the class? Okay, so you do have it available for you. Okay. That'll be fine, and that should get it. It's yeah, if you didn't have Carlson on the machine that you were loading up, or if you didn't have a CAD system, it wouldn't have opened. That's correct. Okay. Good deals. All right. So we'll we'll turn this back off. We'll stay in there getting started drawing, and if you've got anything drawn in it, um, you may um, freely select everything and delete it. I just wanted an empty drawing at this point. And so we're going to start talking about our uh, points. And we'll be like on page 11, we start talking about point groups. And so, you know what a point is just generically. It's a location in three-dimensional space. It's got a X, Y, and Z location or easting, northing elevation. Okay, so what about these points in this? If you consider that polyline that's drawn, and a polyline is nothing more than a connected section of, or a collection of connected segments. Some can be arcs, some can be straight lines. They're all connected together, so they share endpoints, and it becomes one single entity called a polyline. And so the question is, are there any points at those locations? Well, generically, yeah, there's a point there. It changes direction. Okay, so, but there are no actual entities in the drawing known as points, called a CAD point. Now you can, if you wanted, like it says right here, if you want points at those locations, you use standard CAD tools and you can issue a point command. And when prompted, you could snap to the endpoints of each of these figures and it would drop a point at each of those locations. Okay. And then a lot of times, though, we don't even notice that there are points there because you may have the point display mode, this PD mode that we saw earlier in the settings, might be set to not show it or to use a dot or to use a particular symbol. And so if we, though, think about Carlson points or coordinate points, we're typically going to be talking about um, these kinds of things here. Here's an example, and I don't know if on your screen, if you can see this, there might be my CAD point. You see that little dot? And that's just how the CAD system is configured to display a point. It can be a dot, it can be nothing, it can be a plus, an X, a circle, a square, or a combination of any and all of those things. There's also a little vertical tick that you can use for a point, and it's just a single point. But here's what we usually think of in Carlson as a point. It has a point number, an elevation, a description, and usually a symbol. Okay, so all of this is when Carlson makes a Carlson point, it creates a CAD point that holds the location and it superimposes a symbol over top of it. And it also, and that's a block, which is just another drawing from somewhere else in our symbol library. And it's another block, which is this block of labels or what we call attributes. The attribute of that point block is consisting of the point number, the elevation, and the description. Okay. So that's what Carlson does. Now here, if this CAD point is just a dot, okay, and here's an example then of what it could look like. You could have these, now the colors are turned off with these other symbols, But here's a Carlson point, but you don't see a dot or an X or anything, but you see the symbol. You see the point number, elevation, you see its description, which says point with symbol, no node. That's the CAD point. It's there, but it's not displayed. And here's another example where we got the same thing. We've got our Carlson symbol, but we're also showing the actual point node, and we've got the PD mode setting. This variable here is set to display points as X's. And again, you can set them to be a number of places, okay? So how we control that is like this. Let's go back to our drawing and let's draw another polyline. And let's see, this time I'll switch it to this final location. I'm going to draw a point. Or I'm going to click a point, click a point, click a point. I'm just going to draw this as a symbol. Let me change that. Layer definition so you can see it. All right, so there's my entity. If I want to select everything in my drawing, I'm going to draw a window around it from the left to the right, so it has to completely fit inside the window. I'll click the window. I see the grips turn on of everything that's in that window, and I look over my properties and I see what's selected. And if I pull this down, if I had multiple things in there, I would see them. But I see that it's only a polyline. That's all that's in there. I don't have any points in my drawing yet. So if I do I'm going to just type the word point. I'm going to issue a point command, and it wants to know the location of the point. So I'm going to tell it where to put the point. I'm going to put a point on the end point of this polyline. So if you see I hover and that little grip shows up, tells me I'm at the end point. That one shows up and says that would be the midpoint. That would be the end point. That's my object snapping. So I'm going to put one there at that end point. I'm going to put one there at, I issue the command again. I'm going to put it there. I'll issue the command again, put it there. I'll issue the command one more time and put it out here. And then I'm going to just put one out here in free space. And I'll put another one over here in free space. Now you may or may not see those points. They are there. And if I select this, now you see it, the grip shows up, so you can see that there's something there. I look in my properties, I see I've got 7 things selected. I've got a polyline and I've got 6 points. And if you choose and want to change the properties of either all your points, just choose the points, or pull this down and choose the polyline, and you can change those different locations. Now that we have some CAD points in our drawing, and I can see it, I don't know how it comes across over Zoom, but I can see that little dot that's right there and right there. That's where those points were. But I can't see the points that I dropped on the endpoints of my line. But if I go to my settings menu, all the way down to the bottom is my IntelliCAD settings. And I'm going to choose my point style. This is that PD mode that we talked about earlier, my point display mode. I have these 4 columns of options. It can be nothing, or it can be a dot. That's my default. It can be a plus, it can be an X, or it can be a little vertical tick that goes from the point upward, okay? The other column is, it can be those same things, but with circles around them all. The next column is those same things, but with squares around them all. And the final column is those same things with circles and squares around them all. So if I switch to this as my point display mode, I have a choice to use 5% of the screen size, so it's going to constantly resize the points if I zoom in and out. Or I'm going to say an absolute size, and let's give this an absolute size of, say, 5. I have no idea. There we go. They're huge. If I run that again, and let's change that down to 2 maybe, get them a little smaller. There we go. So now I can see those as a point. So if I draw another polyline, and if I think that I'm going to be able to grab hold of that corner right there, that's not a line that has an endpoint, nor is that a circle that has a center. It's not a square that has a midpoint to it, any of that kind of stuff. That is just a single point. And it's that variable, that PD mode, that controls that. That's my IntelliCAD settings point style. That's a single thing. It has a single location where the point itself is, but it's displayed at a size of 2 using that symbol. And so my default is going to be this little dot. Okay. So when I do that, I just see that little dot. Okay. You can also suppress it and turn it off so they're not displayed. But we generally have that on so you can actually see the point location. Now, those are CAD points. If we go to build a surface using those selected items, they will be selected and they will be used if they have elevation. So just keep that part in mind. But the way that we normally think of points and we're using points are going to be using Carlson points. So I'm going to go to my points menu now. And I'm going to say my point defaults. I'm going to set up a couple of defaults here, and I see that I do want to use descriptions. I do want to use elevations. I could put prefixes and suffixes, no need. I am going to locate them on the real Z, so if it had an elevation, it would assign those elevations. I'm going to use a selected symbol. In this case, let's choose, instead of that plus mark, let's use this X or this box, or let's even make it more like say a typical control point symbol. All right. Now I have here this little preview of the attributes, the point number, elevation, description, and I have an attribute layout ID selected as number 2. That's where they're all lined up. If I choose the default, which is number 1, see how these scooted over. So the point would be right there to the left of the elevation. The point number would be above it. Now it's actually centered above it, even though the preview doesn't really show you that. So the point number gets centered above the point. The elevation is off to the right. The description is centered below the point. And you've got 0 through 9, so 10 different ways. One of them that's actually kind of popular in aerial mapping is to put your points down and have the elevation right beside the point, but it's kicked up at a 45-degree angle. And then when you dropped a bunch of points in the drawing, like spot elevations, you would do that and then freeze the layers that the point numbers and the descriptions are on and just show the elevation and the symbol. Okay, that's very common for that type of mapping. Okay, so I'm going to set mine back to 2, and you can see there's different ones with some are italic and some change the order where the description is at the top, the point number at the bottom, all of these different options. So I'm going to choose number 2. And I'm going to use this symbol. And again, you can hit the select symbol button and choose from a list of symbols up here at the top. And this is something that's easy to miss, but these are different categories of different symbols that you can use. Okay. So you can see, and you can build on that. You can see the ones that I've actually added to mine. I had somebody that wanted to set a bunch of symbols that indicated a wetland location. So we did some options, or not a wetland, but a spring. So here's one that says SPG. So he had a point down and said, hey, this is a spring. That's the symbol we use. All right. So we're going to use our little triangle here. I'm going to turn on to use my point numbers. No angle mode. I'm not going to have separate layers so that the symbol goes on a different layer than the point. I'm just going to have it use the same layers. And I'm going to automatically use point numbers. And I'm going to start with point number 1. Here's the layer it's going to go on. I will say draw the point node. So it would draw the actual AutoCAD point wherever I clicked a point. And auto zoom for new points. I'm going to turn that off for right now just so it doesn't zoom the screen around. And some other things I can do down here. You can mask the attributes so it hides parts of the drawing underneath the labels. You can use annotative points so that the size of the point symbols and labels will change if you change the drawing scale. Right now, we'll leave that off. Field to finish codes if you wish, or a GIS file to tag with it along the way. So I'm going to say okay. And now that's just setting my default behavior. So now to create those points, the same place where I made those AutoCAD points, I will go to my points menu again, and instead of my point defaults, I'm going to choose draw locate points. And when I do that, you see my defaults have come in. I've got a couple of other options, one of which, if I've got duplicates, I'm going to erase them and redraw them. Same layer name, etc. Your text size scaler, there's that 0.08 as my text size, regardless of whatever my scale is. And I'm going to say screen pick. And so it says pick a point to create. Well, I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to snap to that endpoint. There's that point, and it wants to know an elevation. Look at my command line. I'm just going to set it as 0. It wants to know a description. Maybe I'm going to call that my POB. And there's my point with my symbol and elevation and description. I'll snap to that other endpoint, give that an elevation of 0, and I'll just call it PI. Okay, I'll do another one. It holds the same value, I just hit enter, holds the same value, I just hit enter, and I'm going to pick on the end, same elevation, I'll call it POE for point of ending. And now if I want to snap right to where those other points were, I'm going to hover there and click a point there. I'm going to call that one stray number 1. I'll call this one stray number 2. And now I can also click down here. Let's give that an elevation of 5. Call that one stray number 3. And one over here, give that an elevation of 10. And we'll call that one 4. All right, so now I'm finished. I'm going to hit enter. I've got some points now, Carlson points. I've got 8 points. So if I select this, all with the window, I look up here, I've got 31 objects. I've got a polyline, which is that. I've got points. It says I have 14 points. Well, let's count them up. We had 4 in the original polyline and 2 for that stray number 1, stray number 2. Those are the AutoCAD points. They are still there, okay? And I now also have 2 additional, so that puts me to 8, but it tells me I have 14 actual points. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So what's happened is I've got the original 6 points that were AutoCAD points. And when I created a Carlson point, it also created an AutoCAD point. And for points numbered 1 through 6, I have also created additional points right on top of those other ones. Okay, so I now have the original 6 still there. I placed Carlson points right where those were. There's another 6, and I've got 7 and 8 that I clicked out into space. And those Carlson points contain an AutoCAD point. So that's what these points, that's why I see 14. But I see block references, and I see, and it's not wide enough if I stretch this out. Stretch this. Now, if I select it, I see that I have 16 block references. So what are those 16 blocks? They are for each point. Now it says 16 because I've got 8 points. So those blocks are this symbol. That is a graphic block. It's just a little drawing kept separately somewhere else and used at the time. That's a block called a graphic block. And I have another block, which is this block of attributes that you see here, which is the point name, the elevation, and description. Okay, so those are all there and all part of that setup. Now, that's, the difference. So if I go back and turn on my settings, IntelliCAD settings, my point style, and if I go back and choose that thing that we had before, you see, I now have my symbol, which was the triangle, and I have the point, which is represented by the X, the square, the circle. Okay. And again, that's just a picture of it. And of course, I have everything else. Now I'm going to go set that one back to my IntelliCAD settings, point style, and I'm going to set it back to my default of just a dot. In which case, now if you were to zoom in closely enough, you could see that dot would actually show up. It's probably not going to show it over the zoom screen, but that's what that Carlson point consists of. But now some points give us a wealth of additional information that we can use. And that's going to be things like using their descriptions, using their elevations, using their point numbers, and where they go. Now, here's going to go back to one of the settings that we set earlier under settings, Carlson configure, and then under survey settings, I had you turn on this automatic point object snapping on. If I turn that off, I'm going to leave it on in my general settings. Right now, it's because, and I can change it here on my settings menu. I can turn it, I can choose it. Now it's turned it off. I can turn it back on by choosing it again. It says point object snaps on. So I'm going to turn it off for right now and show you why I like to have it on. Let's say I wanted to draw a line between points number 1 and 5 and 7. So I'm going to draw a 2D polyline, and I'm just going to say, okay. And if I wanted to sort of, maybe I was out here and I sort of grabbed, out in here, I think I'm sort of, close by that point. Maybe I'm way up here and I just grab here and I come over here and I grab here. Whoops, let me undo that. And so I think I'm, whoops. Hang on a second, let me redo that. So I may think that I'm, getting close to that point location, and maybe I do. Okay, but if I just sort of, half-heartedly snap to this, I've snapped to the end point, snapped to the midpoint, I've snapped to the corner point of this symbol. Now that symbol, those are snappable locations. Whereas if I have my point style, I'll go back to what we had before here. And now if I do that same draw polyline. And let's go here. Let's say if I wanted to grab that corner there, you see, I'm not finding anything about that symbol like I do for this triangle. If I snap there, you see how that endpoint code comes up, that midpoint comes up, but nothing on the point symbol itself. Okay, so that's because these point styles are just a way to display the point that is a single point location. But the Carlson symbols are actual drawn geometry, and you can inadvertently snap to part of the symbol if you're not careful. Okay, now, do we have anything else coming up? All right, so we can get around that with this setting called settings point object snapping, which means it's going to snap to Carlson points, not to the symbol locations. And so now, if I draw a 2D polyline, and if I draw from 1 to 5 to 7, this time watch what happens if I hover the mouse over any part of the point. Now, if I get the symbol, I can still accidentally grab the symbol geometry, but if I just hover over part of the point label, I get a little pop-up. It says that's point number 1, gives me the coordinates, gives me the description, tells me the coordinate file it's from and how it was created with a command called draw locate. So if I click, even out here, I see my little indicator at the point locations. If I click, 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 I know that I'm going to go to those point locations. Okay. May follow how that part works. So far, so good. All right. So we are at a good bookmark location. And since you've all been good little students, we're going to take our mid-afternoon break. Let's go ahead and we'll come back at a quarter till the hour. So it'll give us about 17 minutes. So when we come back, we're going to go through the exercises in the book about using using these points and see how and what the benefit to using Carlson points is. And we'll conclude with this point groups and how we can use groups to help us in our drawing stuff. Okay. So let's go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and stop my share. I will pause that recording. Okay. So we looked at a couple of things to sort of keep in mind about our points. We got some placements of these Carlson points. So now let's go to everything in our drawing that we have done so far. And let's type the command erase. We'll just type erase at the keyboard. And let's type the word ALL to select all things in the drawing. We hit enter. It asks us to continue our selection set. We hit enter because we're finished. And now it all clears everything out. We're back to a blank drawing. Now we're going to be doing this exercise on starting on page 13, where we're going to stay in our drawing, but we're going to set our coordinate file to exercise 1 by going to the points menu and set coordinate file to exercise 1 coordinates. And that's included in, whoops, let me get it back to here. Yeah. So that's included in our data sets. So let's go to the points menu and set the coordinate file. It's right here on our menu. And again, you've got new and existing tabs. So we'll go to existing. And again, ignore those dot underscore, but we want to choose exercise 1 coordinates. And we see in our little preview, there are points go from 1 to 22. There's 22 total points. And you can see the same thing for the other coordinate file. So it shows us a little bit about which one we want. We want that one, exercise 1, open. Now, what has happened? And in our case, nothing. We don't see anything in the drawing. The points do not magically appear in the drawing. We have to put them in the drawing, but they are included in our coordinate file that we can verify by going to points, list points. And when we do that, let's choose the all button and hit OK. And we see all of our points. They have coordinates. There's 1 through 22. We get some statistics. We've got up here my project, location, job number. Again, that's from those initial settings. They're just headers. It also tells us the actual point file itself. If I open this up enough to see the whole thing, there it is. Now you can make edits to this. It's just like a text editor. You can change the, well, you can't really change the fonts here, but you can drop them into your drawing and change the fonts. You can, do all kinds of things with it. You can save it to a separate file. You can print it. You can put it in the drawing. So there's a command right there to output to the screen. So you could do that, say output to the screen. Take some defaults, say click a spot here and give it a rotation or hit enter to just go horizontally. Nothing's happened yet till you exit the report. And there now is that. And it's just, in this case, a piece of text. If I double click it, it's going to bring up the text editor, which I can change fonts, colors, all kinds of different things. All right. So I'm going to select that and just delete it. But that's why I like that Carlson point viewer. Now, so we have points in the coordinate file, but nothing yet in our drawing. How do you get them from the coordinate file into the drawing? Now, what we did before, we chose this command called points, draw, locate points. And right there's your clue. It's going to draw the points, and locate points means it's going to, in addition to reading from the coordinate file and putting them in the drawing, you can also create points by either typing coordinates or clicking something in the drawing, just like we did before. So draw, locate is sort of a combination. And I'm going to now change my symbol from that diamond. I think I'll switch to using these X's, for instance. I'll put it on a layer called points for now. Now notice this starting point number would be 23 because that's my first available point number. So if I were going to create new points by clicking in the drawing, it would start with number 23. I have checked on to automatically increment, so it would go up and do so. So now I could draw these points, which I'm going to do. You can draw a range of points like 1 through 5 or 10 through 12, or we're going to draw all. So we hit draw all, and they're going to all draw in the drawing. And depending on how your defaults are set, it might zoom you to where you can see all the points. And in my particular case, it did a zoom and showed me those points. Now I'm going to change the color of that elevation so you can see it a little better on the screen. And there you go. Notice these points do not have any descriptions, and I can verify that by looking at my points, list points, and I see the description column is empty. So they just have blank descriptions. Otherwise, you would see them. And I'm going to just go to a point down here, like number 22 in the lower left corner. And if you double click a point, it pops up a little point editor for changing that particular point. Notes, and I've got a GIS tab, but remember that CRDB format. I don't have that format in use, so I can't change anything here. If I did, I would see any defined GIS attributes. You can associate a photograph with this point. Maybe you've, surveyed some control points and you want to photograph the entry so somebody can find it later. You could then add an image that would be associated with that point. You got some settings like how far when you see these do you want the editor to display number of decimal places? And that's back here in our general tab that controls the number of decimal places. Okay, so there's your northing, your easting, your elevation, and you can control the number of elevation decimals that show up in the drawing. Whereas this is just the actual data. Okay, in fact, if you turn that to something higher than 3, let's take it all the way up here, see if there's any, see that even goes out. So it rounds that to whatever that settings is. And then my elevation decimals that I want to display on the screen, I can change to that. And there you see the extra coordinate value show up. So double clicking a point will bring up that single point editor. If you go to the points menu though and choose edit points, it brings up all the points in a spreadsheet. You make your edits. There's that number 22 that we just changed, 9264. We see 926 because I set that to 3. And you could have notes associated with that point as well. And in any individual point, notice this changes down here. So that lets you make edits to the point file sort of, en masse. So I've got a bunch of points here. Well, what do they help us with? Well, let's suppose we wanted to draw some lines connecting up certain points. So let's zoom in down here, for instance, and let's say we wanted to draw a point from point 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Several ways to do that. We could, if we just chose our draw command or draw menu, and we just came down to polyline down toward the bottom and just did a standard polyline. This is the IntelliCAD polyline command. Notice it asks you for the start of the polyline. So you would have to pick that point. So I'm using that point snapping. And then it wants to know the next point. So I can go over here to 2 and I keep clicking back and forth or, making sure I have my snapping set correctly. And that would accomplish that. And that's just a standard point. Now, if I should move a point here, let's say if I just select that point, hit move, and I moved it here, and yes, I'm going to update that point location. Notice the line did not go with it. So I'll put that back. That's because I used a standard CAD polyline command. Still, if all I'm after is a polyline, it does the trick. But here's where point numbers help us out. And when we use a Carlson command, notice the difference in the prompt. I'm going to go to draw, and I'm going to say a 2D polyline, and I'll just take my defaults. Notice the prompt, it says pick a point, just like the other one did, where I had to snap to the point location, which I could do, or I could even come down here and pick some points in the screen. And then it says, it keeps saying pick a point or point number. Well, if I say 1 and hit enter, it goes to point 1. If I hit 2 and hit enter, it'll go to point 2. Or I can even say go to 2 and continue to point 5. So 2, 3, 4, 5. I could say, let's say if I wanted to go 11, 12, 13, well, let's say I wanted to go to 11, to 10, to 9, to 8. So my ranges work backwards as well. So I can say go to 11 through 8. And there it goes, 11, 10, 9, and I'm on point 8. Okay, so there's 10, 11's up here. All right, so you get the idea. I'm going to select this.
Excuse me, Ken, could you
Yes.
just repeat what got you to this one, doing it this way
All right, do you have your points in the drawing?
versus screen pick? What did you just open up?
I said draw on the draw
Yep.
menu. So this is Carlson's draw, and I'm going to go
Right.
polyline, and it's going to be at this elevation, or I could say set the elevation by the first point that I picked if I snapped to something that had elevation, but I'll just take this at 0. And I
Yeah.
said, okay. And now where it says on the prompt, it says pick a point or a point number.
Oh, okay. So it's
So-
the same, just polyline, but
So,
you're
and
using, okay.
mix it, yes, and you can mix them back and forth. So I said 1 to 5, and I can go click, 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 and then I might say 11-8. Okay, so that went up there after I click, 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 11, 10, 11, 8. So I'll hit enter to finish. I'm finished drawing with those numbers. Now remember our linking. So if I come down here and select this point, I'm just going to grab, excuse me, let me grab the point and then just move it down here. And it says, you want to update the coordinate for the point? So I'll say yes. Notice the line went with it. Okay. So that's what all those linkings are going to do. The moving the point prompts me to update the coordinate file. If I say yes, it changes that. Now, if I do the same thing, let's edit point number 2, just double clicking on it. And let's just take it from 979. Let's make that, let's make it a full 1000 in the north. And the east, we'll leave it alone in the east, and we'll just say okay. So point 2 got changed, and again, the line went with it because the value changed in the coordinate file. Okay. So now try this to show you again. I'm going to go through and I'm going to type erase again. I'm going to type all, hit enter, hit enter. Everything's gone off my drawing, but I still have my points in my coordinate file, verified by my list points. Now, if I draw a 2D polyline, and I'm just going to say 1 to 22. And it's going to draw starting at point 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Even though my points are not my drawing, it read it from the coordinate file. And so let's say I edit point number 2. I'll go to my points, edit points. I'll select point number 2, and there's that original 1000. Well, let's make that one 980 like we did before. We'll close. Yes, we'll save the changes, and you should see the line switched locations. I wasn't able to really tell that.
Could I ask another quick question?
Yeah, sure.
This might not at all be the way to think about it. I think it might be coming from the program I used to use. But so if I'm kind of sorting through different points, and would this be one way, maybe I look at the list of points and have separated out whatever, edge of pavement, and
Oh,
I
okay.
could I use those point numbers? They might not be,
Exactly right.
I might not be just following, like, in order, so I might have a list for myself of knowing which ones I wanna follow, enter them in that way, and then turn them into a layer by
Yeah,
selecting that
yeah.
polyline and putting it on a separate layer. What's the best way to sort of sort points
That's
into?
exactly right. And that is our
Okay,
next exercise called point groups, where we're going to make
okay.
groups based on those descriptions of those points. Okay. So if I put this back to points, draw all, there's my points. And if I draw a 2D polyline, and let's say, 1 through 22, again, we've got it like that. Now that's setting those particular points. Okay, that's the total. Now that's a 2D. So if I were to look at this in 3 dimensions, I'm just going to hold the shift key, press and hold the wheel on my mouse, and I'm going to roll it up. You're going to see the points are all at their own individual elevations, whereas this one's down at 0. Come up here and click the top, so I'm back on my plan view. Likewise, if I draw a 3D polyline instead of a 2D, and I'm going to uncheck where it says prompt for elevation, so I'm going to let it just read the points. And I'm going to say okay and say 1 to 22 this time. So there's that same line. Excuse me, I just used the current layer. And now, if I were to zoom that up in 3D, you can see that it actually has the differing elevations and they're right where the points are. Okay. So that's another aspect in whether we want to use 2D or 3D geometry. Sometimes we do 2D like for alignments and such like that, so we can keep arcs and things in it. Sometimes we need it as 2D, sometimes we'll use both. Okay, keep the 2D for annotation purposes and use the 3D for modeling purposes. Now, let's zoom down, or let's go to the points menu and let's edit the points. I hit the wrong choice. Points, edit points. And let's talk about what Sarah just asked about. Let's say points 1 through 5. And I'm going to select these 5 points. And I'm going to go to this. I think I have to copy paste. So in my description, I'm going to just double click there and call this CTRL. This is a control point. Okay, so I'll now select that, copy it with Control C and then Control V. So these are control points. And let's put one more down here, say point number 11. We'll make a control point. Okay. And then this point, anything you want. Maybe let's call it EOP for edge of pavement. So we'll copy that and we'll paste, 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 paste. And that was 11 down through 9 or 4 through 9 or whatever that was, 5 through 9. Okay, and then maybe, something else. So anyway, we've got those descriptions. We're going to say, yes, save the changes. Okay. Now, nothing's happened here. I don't see, oh, yes, it did. There's my description, CTRL. And over here are my EOPs. Okay, now, if we choose to draw a 2D polyline, for instance, then we choose OK. And well, that's going to ask me for those points or point numbers. Let me see. I want to do this using those descriptions. Well, I could draw locate and put in here for my description match. I could say just draw my control points. Now, the other points are already drawn, so this wouldn't illustrate that. That's just to draw the points. Now, if I want to draw by those descriptions, I don't think this command, I don't see one here that lets me select, well, I can select a code, but that's from a field to finish code table. So I could do that, but I don't have that matched to this set of descriptions. So there's no real way to do that by description, but I've got a couple of other options. I can go to draw and come down here to polyline. And then I can choose polyline by nearest found. Now that doesn't give me much control over the order, but we can see what this might do. And I'll make this a 2D polyline, give it a maximum distance apart to look for. And here I might type CTRL to just do my control points. And let's put that on my final layer so you can see it. And we'll say OK. And now select the points from the screen or by point number. You choose the method. I'm just going to do it by the screen. And if I grab them all, it's only going to connect up the ones that had that description on them. I could do the same as edge of pavement. So EOP by the screen. I'll just type the word all. And so now that would be my edge of pavement. Except I got a point way down here. Now what caused that? I may have clicked down there. Let me try that one more time. Draw polyline by nearest edge of pavement. by the screen. All. Huh, 2, 3, 4, 5. My points. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 edge of pavement points. Wow, that's the first time I've seen that command fail, and I don't know why it picked that point down there, but I would just select it, hover over the grip, and remove the vertex. But that doesn't explain why that happened, but anyway, it did. Now, here's what I would typically do, though, in this situation. I'm going to select these two lines, get rid of them. As you might even say, let's select their points and get rid of them from the drawing as well. And if I draw locate my points, I want to draw a certain set of points. I'm going to say CTRL. Okay, so I'm going to put these on this control. Now I don't. So right up here where it says wildcard description match, I'm going to only draw my control descriptions. And if I say draw all, those are the only ones that draw. Then I could look at those and say 1 through 4 and then to 11 or 11 to 1, 2, 3, 4. However, I might want to use those to draw with. Okay, but this helps me control the placement of points. I can do another draw locate points, and this time just draw the EOP points and say draw all. And now there they are, but I'm missing all these other points. Next, you could draw the remaining points by changing that back to asterisk, but let me actually change this back to EOP, and let's put them on a layer called EOP. And maybe, yeah, so let's draw all of those. And I'm going to do CTRL on a layer called CTRL, and I'm going to use a symbol that's more like a control point. Draw all. And so now they have redrawn. It's on a layer of CTRL. And over here is my layer that's on layer EOP. Now, if I want the rest of these, I could draw locate, change that description back to an asterisk to draw everything. And let's change its symbol to be just a plus. And I'm going to put these on layer PNTS. Now watch what happens here, or don't watch, but be aware. It says duplicates. Do you want to erase the previous ones and redraw them? So this would take out control and EOP and redraw them on layer points with this symbol. Or you can allow duplicates and it would stack one on top of the other, or let's say draw only the new ones. And now we choose draw all. And so these come in on layer points. The ones we drew before are on layer control, and these are on EOP with its own set of symbols. So that's a way that we can use those descriptions to help us draw and locate these points.
And would this be so from right when you've brought in your CRD and then you're starting to add the points, or
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Is
So
there a
you,
way to hide if you've already done that, can you, like, hide all of that and then kind of sort through them this way, or you would really start from the beginning like this?
well, you could erase them and redraw them. Uh,
Okay.
You can also draw over top of the ones before if you want, or
Right. Okay.
if you knew a point range or this point descriptions like 1, 2, 3, 4, let's draw those. If I said draw locate points, and let's draw the CTRL points, and let's use a circle for the symbol, and let's put them on our layer exist, for whatever reason. And we said, make sure here we said not draw new only, but erase and redraw. So it's going to find those. CTRL points, it left these other ones. See, they're still out here on points, but my control now is on existing, and you can see it's placed them according. So I can redraw those particular ones as long as I have this switch right here set to erase and redraw. And if I restrict to this, it's going to find all of those and erase them and redraw them with whatever I've chosen here. If I put that back to asterisk, it doesn't say draw everything else, but leave these others alone. So if I made that, everything, and if it says erase and redraw, it's going to erase everything and redraw. So how do I get that to happen? If I've drawn control and I've drawn EOP and I want to leave them alone, but I want to get everything else. And that's where we're going to talk about these point groups over here. Okay. So I'm going to cancel that for a minute now. And let's go to the point groups exercise. So I'm going to just select everything in my drawing and erase it again. And I'm going to go to my points menu. And I'm going to set the coordinate file. And this time, instead of that one that we just used, I'm going to choose exercise 2, point groups. Up, no, wait a minute. I think I did something wrong here. Is it points? Oh, I chose the wrong command. Set the coordinate file. Sorry about that. So when this comes up, if it decides to, I'm going to choose exercise 2, open. And again, nothing happens. I haven't drawn them, but I could draw, locate all my points. Let's just say draw all. Let's see, I'm going to set this description back to asterisk, and I'm going to put these on a layer name, P and TS. I'll choose my symbols, just a little X, and I'll say draw all. They're going to draw, and they'll either all pop in together or you'll see it like this. It's just a mass of points, right? I see some points here that say building, 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 building. And I got some other points. There's a property corner, a P corner. There's an edge of pavement, edge of pavement. Okay, so there's an edge of pavement radius point. So I've got all of these points, and I would have to have a field book sketch that tells me, which of these building points are the actual building. Does it follow that, or is it a long building, or is it just these individual little square buildings? I don't know anything about this. That's why Field to Finish is such a great tool. So what we're going to do with this now is we're going to let's create some point groups. Okay. So we're going to go to our points menu and we're going to choose point group manager. And this is what we're going to set up with our group. So I've got a little thing here that I can build my groups. And I've got a bunch of points in my file. I've drawn them in my drawing, but I want to create a point group. Now I've got several things to notice about here. I've got a group menu where I can create, edit, delete, copy, or import. I've got a points menu where I can insert into the drawing. That's like draw, locate, erase from the drawing, get reports on them, highlight, isolate, freeze, blah, blah, blah. Draw a 2D polyline between those. Do all of these different things that I can do with the points. There are also buttons down here at the bottom. So I can choose groups, create, or I can just hit the create button. So now up here's a group name. I'm going to select that group and I'm just going to type all points, all PTS. Now I build this group by either including points or excluding points. So I'm going to include, and I can say include all, and that would be all the points. And then hit save. And now I've got a point called all points, and that's all the points in my file. I don't have to make that group, but that's just there if you wanted to. Let's create another group, and let's call this group building. So building points. Now I'm going to uncheck include all because I don't want them all. But I'm going to build, I can either take it from a point list and choose this list and select out the ones that I wanted, which I don't really see anything here. I would just type numbers if I knew them, and that builds that list. I can select them from the drawing. If I did, I can select them inside a circle or inside a polyline or along a polyline if it's already drawn and got points, all that kind of stuff. But really what we're going to do is come down here and check description. And you could type that description, BLDG, if that is the right description. We'll see. We'll save the points. So there's now BLDG. Well, there's no points in it. All points, there's BLDG. Well, let's edit that group and see what we did wrong. There's BLDG. Let's maybe that description didn't work right. So let me maybe uncheck this point list up here. Maybe that was the problem. Then if I said BLDG and hit save, does that, okay, there we go. There's now all of my BLDG points. And it's only those points. Now notice point number 16, 17, 18 are in this group. They are also in this group, 16, 17, 18, my building points, because they're part of all points. They're also part of building. Now, let's edit this one more time, or let's look at all points again. Let me open this up a little bit bigger. So I look at my all points and I come down here to 16. I see these building points. All right. And it looks like, all right, they're all that same description. And then here's some more down here building. All right. So that works for that one. But I also noticed, let's see if we make a group called boundary, BDY. I've got a point, BDY, BDY, BDY. But here I've got one called BDI rad point. That's a radius point of, say, a curved figure along the boundary. Okay, now these points were all created from a drawing that had all the geometry drawn in it. And so we use that to create the points. And I'll show you that in a minute. So we can, let's create that, what do we call it? Boundary, BDY points. So if we create a group, and let's call this one boundary points. We'll uncheck include all. We'll come down here and say description. And we can set by a selection, we can set a point, or we can set from a list. Here's a list of all our points. So if I choose boundary and say, okay, I don't have to select them all. I can just choose that description. Then they're going to be in that list here, all my boundary points. However, we edit that group. And instead of boundary, if I put boundary asterisk and save, notice now I get anything that starts with BDY and ends with anything else. That's the asterisk part. That now becomes that group. Okay.
So if it's not an exact match, could you also do asterisk BDY?
Yeah, if you did
Say if
asterisk,
you like screwed something up with the code, so you know you're gonna have
right.
points with that slightly different, is that the best way?
Yeah, asterisk BDY and hit save. Notice what it did. It took a list from all points. It said anything, but it has to end with BDY. So BDY space RADPT is not ending with BDY. That's ending with something else. So that's why when I did this one as, whoops, my BDY points, when I said asterisk BDY, it says start with anything, but you must end with BDY. Now you can also say start with anything, find BDY, and end with anything else. Okay. So it would find anything that description either had something or nothing, and it found BDY, and then it had something or nothing after the end of it. It would work either way. Now you're free to type those, you're free to pick them from the list, and if you type them, oh, here's BDY. Now let's make another group, and let's call this one property corners. I'm going to uncheck include all. I will turn on my description and set from my list. I'm going to choose boundary points. And I'm going to scroll down here and I'm going to see another set of point descriptions called P core. So I'm going to hold the control key and click one of those. So now I've got two different descriptions and I'll say okay. So now my property corners include all the points along the boundary as well as the points that are interior to the group called property corner points. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit OK for this. And we've now built our groups. Now let me show you what this drawing looks like that we're using. So we're going to open up a different file here now. We're going to open a file called Civil Demo. Okay. So we open this file, and there's the file that was used that built these points. Now, if you look at the top, you've got two files open here. I'm going to go back to the one where we had our points. I'm just going to close it. I don't care about it. I'm not going to save it. But now here I'm in a new file. Well, I still got that coordinate file. I still have the groups made, I think. I may have to double check that. So let's go to the points menu and let's choose set coordinate file. And let's find that exercise 2 point groups. And we'll open that up. We'll look at our points. We'll list the points. We'll list them all. And we see, yep, there they are. Those are our familiar points. Now let's look at our point groups. Our point group manager. Yeah, they stayed. That's what I was checking on. So now, let's say I wanted to draw all the property corner points. And if I look at those and I see I've got BDYs, I did not include any of the BDY radius points. So I've got some parts of this boundary that are along a circular figure and it computed the radius points. I'm not going to include those. So I'm going to just put my property corners down. So I could choose that at this point, and I could, from this manager, I could go to points, insert into drawing. Okay, that's one way to do it. You can also erase those particular groups from the drawing or erase them from the coordinate file and the drawing. Anyway, so you have control over it from here. So I'm going to just say, okay, I've verified they're there. Now let's go to the points menu and just simply draw locate points. I'll use this property corner. In fact, I'm going to set that, instead of using that standard circle, I'm going to go to this other category at the top called points plus wipeout. So it's going to be a circle and it's going to have a little figure underneath it that's going to blank out the drawing underneath it. It looks like I've trimmed my line work up to my circles. Okay. And I'm going to put this on a layer called corners. And now instead of draw all or draw range, I'm going to say draw point group. And when I do that, there's our familiar point group. And I just choose my property corners and I say, okay. And boom, there they are right there in my file. Now notice, unlike the last file that we're in, you see the text is a different looking style, kind of that blocky looking style. That's governed by a specifically named point style that you could go to draw text, set style, and you could find that style called PTXT, and that style is built with this font name called txt.shx. I'm going to pull that down. I'm going to choose my Calibri Light. That's one of my true type fonts. And I'll just say, okay. Yes, I'll save the changes. And you can see they'll actually look a little nicer. So now if I wanted to turn this in, say, as a a plat where I put all the property corners in, well, you can do a couple things. You can freeze off the layers that these descriptions, these attributes are on. And that would be if I went to my view menu and let's choose freeze by pick. and you could pick the point number, the point description, and the point elevation and the point description. And now it looks like there they are. But if I double click the circle, see, it still has the description in it. It still has an elevation and a point number, etc. Okay, so that's one way we can do it. I'm going to go back to, back to view. And I'm going to now thaw layer to bring that back from having frozen the layer. Okay. Now, let's see, I also have my point defaults. I think my attribute ID was set to 1 instead of 2 from my previous drawing. But anyway, so that's one way we could do that. If we did another way, let's go to our point group manager again. Let's find that property corners and let's go to points and let's say erase from drawing. Okay, not from the coordinate file. And this time let's go to points and say draw locate points. Keep everything like we had it before, but if we didn't want to have to freeze those layers, we could uncheck descriptions, elevations, and point numbers and say draw point group. There's our group. We say okay. There's our points, and they still have the point number and elevation and description, but if I double click that particular one, notice it has there's our point number, there's our elevation, and our description is our coordinate file description, but the drawing description is blank. There's nothing there. Now that is sort of a key aspect of that feature called drawing by field to finish, where we would draw a point based on a description, but maybe give it a different description to display in the drawing. And that's how that works. And you have a set of codes that you define what that's going to be. Okay, so that's one way of using point groups. And when I did these, when I made these particular points, I used a particular command called under the Kogo menu, and I said, create points from entities. And that's where I gave it a particular, you can either draw them or not. If you don't draw them, they won't show up. But I said, create these points and give it a description. So I gave it a description, say BDY for boundary. And then when I said, okay, it asked me, or what do you want to process? Well, any of the polylines and lines and arcs and such, curve points, and this is where you could tell it to skip the radius points. I did not when I made them. You could skip the midpoints, which I did. Okay, you can avoid duplicates and all that kind of stuff. So that's how those were made from that drawing. My building points, you see, if I were to draw locate points, and I'm going to turn my elevation, my, not text only, but elevations, point numbers, and descriptions. I'm going to set back to my points. I'm going to use just a plus mark for my building corners. I don't want elevation. I want to, what's going on? Why isn't that? That should be turned on. Go back to my points defaults. Turn elevations and descriptions back on. And now go to points, draw locate points. Now my descriptions is checked. I don't know why that didn't let me check it, but anyway, descriptions, elevations, point numbers, and I'm going to put this on a layer called buildings. Draw point group. This time I'm going to draw my building group. And there they are. All plopped down there, labeled with that point ID of number 2, in which case you could, I forgot to go back and change that from a circle, but you get the idea. Okay, so so that's a way of using that. Now, the way field to finish works, we'll just have a little discussion here. We're not going to actually run field to finish and learn that system, but the way it works is when you let me go back to point group manager, and this time I'm going to create pavement as a group, and I'm going to set EOP. Save that. I'm going to now take my pavement points, right click them or choose the menu. I'm going to insert them into the drawing. 17 points are drawn, so they'll be on the same layer and all that. I'll say okay. So now I've got, here's my EOP point 52, 54. So they're going to be along this blue line. So that's an arc up to that point, a tangent, part of the circle, part of that circle, a little tangent, now back to the arc. So you see that's got all my EOP points. Now the way this would happen in field to finish, when I'm out here on the ground surveying, I may come over here and maybe I'm walking down this direction, I'm going to walk up the road. If I find this point, I'll call that point P core. And I would say that's a P core point. I'll come up here and say that's an EOP point. And then maybe I'm walking down the road and I come over here and that's a point called P core. Then I'm going to go over here and call this EOP. Actually, I'd put a PC in my code to make it go around the arc. There's an EOP. And then I got another or another P core point. And then I pick up EOP PT, and then I got an EOP that's along the tangent. That's an EOP PC. There's an EOP PT. And then I would say, here's another P core, and then P core and P core, and then back, to where it finished. Then when I tell it to process my points based on, oh, and I would also have gotten building, building, building. So based on the point that I get them, the descriptions that I've given them, and the order in which I've collected them, it's going to automatically draw the lines between all those points on specific layers, turn them into arcs if they need to be arcs, keep them straight if they're not, and put the points and the symbols down if you want to include them or not. And so that's a very powerful system called drawing field to finish. And that's all part of that type of work, but it's all part of what we can use points for, and descriptions and point groups, and how we can really sort of ramp up our efforts. And I notice there's a property line missing. That's also part of the exercise in our civil stuff or survey stuff, to recreate that property line and all kinds of things. So, it's a nice little sample file, and it corresponds with those points. Okay. So everybody have a sense of how the points are going to work for us, and point groups. Here's an example of, we did those property corner. This is on page 17, looks like, in our manual. And now when we come back in the morning, we're going to talk about the real meats and potatoes of what we're doing and what we're gearing up for. And that's to develop these surfaces. We're going to model the terrain and we're going to create that. If you would like, I will invite you to read over these few pages. You don't need to, and I'm not going to read it to you tomorrow, but basically it talks about, how the computer models the surface. And I think there's like 8 pages with some pictures in it. So we'll go over those as we need to, and then we're going to jump into a drawing that has a lot of information for us that we can use to model our surface. We're going to learn to use our 3D viewer and to verify things. And then we're going to finish with this little exercise that puts everything together. We start working with points. We build a surface. It's a little stockpile. And then we compute the volume of that stockpile. And we cut in a little borrow pit into our stockpile. And we merge those surfaces together We can do some contouring, and we'll draw a little roadway to come into our surface, to our borrow pit surface. We'll give it some vertical alignment. Then we go out and put it in our drawing, and we tie it into the existing grade. So it's got cut and fill slopes, ties into our final surface. And there you can see that final surface as it's modeled, and that's supposed to look like rock, but the pattern's real small. You can't really see it. But you can see the contours of what we're going to wind up with at the end of the day tomorrow. Okay? So any questions so far? Now we're going to learn, as we go through these exercises, we're going to learn some of these other commands like edit, erase by layer, and erase by closed polyline, and some of these different things. We've already looked at this draw 2D polyline, some of the options and some of the things it can allow us to do with that. Just as a quick example, let's draw a 2D polyline, and let's uncheck the current drawing properties and say set the color, and let's make it a particular color maybe. I'll make it yellow, and I'm just going to start drawing some points out here. And now I'm going to type, one of my options down here is follow. So if I say F, it says pick the polyline I want to follow. Well, I want to follow this boundary line. So I picked it, and it says, what's the first point to follow? I'm going to snap to that endpoint. I'm going to start right there. And it asks me a question, do I want to interpolate those vertical elevations? I don't have any, so I'm going to say no, it doesn't matter. And now it wants me to tell it where to quit following it. Well, I'm going to quit following it out at this endpoint here. I'll say there, and now it sketches this in, and it's still dashed. And it says, is this correct? And that's because this is a closed figure. If I were to say no, it would say, is that correct? Maybe that's what I wanted to follow. And if I say no again, then it would go around that side. So you choose which direction from start and stop point. So let's just go down to, let's go back to this shorter side, and we'll say yes. So now it's drawn and followed that line all the way to there, and I could click out here and then do another follow if I wanted. You know, maybe I was turning this into a, you know, maybe another adjoining property. I wanted to make sure I followed along the edges of that property line. Or in this particular case, if I were doing that same command here, and I said follow, I picked that line, I'm going to start at that location, no interpolation, I'm going to finish down at this location. Yes, I'll take that as my stop distance. And so what that's kept me from doing is having to click, 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 and find all the little vertex points, or even where this is an arc, but you might not even recognize it. It might be so flat that it doesn't show up as an arc. But if I were to look at that figure, let me move that off to the side here. And if I go to my drawing, my inquiry menu rather, and turn on my drawing inspector, and if I hover over here, I can see some information about, you know, the horizontal distance, slope distance. It is 2D, so those are going to match. That's the distance of that segment. Well, watch what happens when I get into that arc. It recognizes that it is an arc of a certain length and certain radius. And then I come around over to here, I get more. There's another arc piece up here, back to a linear piece. So when I chose to follow that line, it gave me the advantage of following along and grabbing all of the little vertices that it needed that one had, including ones I might not recognize. If I try to snap, 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 and I go, oops, that should have been an arc, you know, that kind of stuff. So it's a really nice tool that's part of the Carlson draw polyline that you don't get in the standard CAD polyline drawing tool. Okay, so we're going to learn as we go through everything that we're doing tomorrow. We're going to pick up a lot of those kind of tools and tricks that we can see that we're going to sort of keep at our fingertips. Okay. So any questions to this point? Everybody good? I will send out links for tomorrow's meeting a little later after our meeting finishes tonight. I'll set that up. I think it's already set up. I just need to send you new links. So watch your emails. I'll send those to everyone. And we'll reconvene at 9 o'clock Eastern tomorrow morning. Okay? Everybody good? All right. And if there's any questions, jot them down, bring them in the morning. We'll go over things. All right? So with that, I will stop my share. I will stop my recording.